My son is in the audience. And one of the things I really like about this year is that I have seen hackers carrying around babies, and I've seen parent hackers bringing teenager hackers. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This is the lifeboat. You guys energize me, because the stuff I tell you that you cheer when I say this in Washington, they shit in their pants, or they say, oh, fuck, who is this lunatic? But we're making progress. All right, now this year, because I've done this 3 times now, I've decided to give you a very fast brief, and here it is. If you Google in Google News for hackers and steal, you will get a press release that gives you tiny URLs to both of the briefs that I've given at this conference, except that the first brief I added 2 slides, and I'll update that tomorrow. Well, these are the elements of intelligence. Your government is fucking stupid. Okay? Brief history of intelligence: secret war, strategic analysis, smart nation. Smart nation is about collective intelligence. This isn't me. This is guys like Tom Atlee that has the Co-Intelligence Institute. This is guys like Howard Rheingold that's written about smart mobs. This is about whatever his name is. I can't pronounce it. It's like Polish on steroids. Wisdom of the Crowds, Army of Davids. Okay, the internet has empowered the people. Right now there is a race between Dick Cheney and white-collar criminals on Wall Street and us with the internet. And that's what I want to win. So, you wouldn't believe this, but your government spends $60 billion a year on the 5% of the information they can steal, and they don't spend shit on open sources in 183 languages. We like to operate out of embassies, diplomatic cover. So when we steal code books, the entire CIA station comes in at 5 o'clock at night. The foreign guards call local liaison, say, "Hi, CIA's working tonight." Local liaison watches the airwaves and sees the mass communications between the embassy and the embassy, our embassy, U.S. embassy, and the embassy that we're stealing a code book from. Hello, this is not rocket science. The next morning they walk into the ambassador and say, "Hi, CIA was in your office last night." And you can ask me later about how we walk through walls and all that good shit. We don't fucking process what we collect. And oh, by the way, what we collect is less than 10% of what we need to know. No data standards, although I got to tell you, there is one small, tiny part of the U.S. intelligence community that I like: the Chief Information Officer. Major General Mayor Rose is not only into data standards and sharing, he shocked CIA security officers by having a forum open to foreigners. What a concept. We don't tag all of our stuff. In 1988, I told the intelligence, 1988, that's like the last century, okay? I told the intelligence community, if you don't have fucking geospatial attributes on every datum, you cannot do real-time all-source processing that says, tell me everything there is to know about this click going back 200 years. Hello? Sorry, I'm getting excited. It's all these black t-shirts. They really turn me on. All right. So, no interoperability, no all-source sharing. Now, I'm going to go through these real fast because we want to get to this thing. Emphasis on security instead of answers. Would you believe this? CIA security is so fucking stupid. It is based on guys with high school educations that have gotten promoted by checking safes at night, that they insist on hiring high school kids from Kansas that are virgins who have never talked to a foreigner. This is a very small group, okay? And once you're a CIA analyst, if you dare to call a foreigner in the country you're responsible for, you get investigated. Hello? We're focused on threats instead of opportunities. Now, in my earlier speech, I talked about the 10 threats that the United Nations has identified, and I'll end with that. The bottom line is that the U.S. government is focused on less than 20% of what matters. We focus on local now instead of global future. This is symptomatic of Wall Street owning the U.S. government. We don't impact on the budget. If you really want to know what the U.S. budget and policy is, actually, if you want to know what U.S. policy is, you look at the budget. I'll tell you what U.S. policy is on Homeland Security today. It is pork combined with incompetence. Okay? This is a no bullshit statement. This is well documented in the literature. Your policymakers don't know shit about the real world. They know about winning votes in their local constituencies where pinheads elect pinheads. That's what we have to change. Are we having fun yet? All right. Part of the problem, and I love you guys because, you know, you energize me. You really do. I feel blessed that I somehow got hooked up with this. I can't even remember. Maybe Wynn Schwartau recommended me to Emmanuel. Senator Boren, David something or other, Bergen maybe, have both talked about the need to internationalize U.S. education. Now, we all know, and I absolutely love that anarchist poster, Schools as Prisons, which is why I've brought my son here to set him free. But the fact of the matter is, U.S. schools suck. All right? They were created to build factory workers. And that's one of the things we've got to change. So my vision for national intelligence is, I'm going to take the $60 billion. I'm going to cut the spies to $20 billion. I'm going to put the other $40 billion in education, including online, distance learning, and so forth. Believe it or not, U.S. intelligence doesn't impact on what we buy. When I stood up the Marine Corps Intelligence Command, I looked at the real world. And, oh, by the way, we buy airplanes for a warm day that is not humid. The real world is hot and humid. This means that our airplanes, built by very expensive airplanes, have half the lift, half the loiter, and half the range as advertised. All right? We're not building airplanes to a real world. And, oh, by the way, there's a reason why European companies don't sell trucks to the third world that weigh more than 30 tons. So why do we have a 97-ton artillery system? Okay, or a 45-ton M1A1, which invented the concept of gallons per mile? Okay? The U.S. government is stupid. It really is literally stupid. I'm not saying the people are stupid. I'm saying the system is stupid. We haven't impacted on the private sector. Microsoft should never have been a lawsuit. Microsoft should have been a fucking standard that say, you have open APIs or we'll kill you. We build these extremely complex systems that have absolutely no provision for how are they going to get smart. The United States government cannot find, fix, and follow an individual or even a unit. All right? We're a static system. We're built to follow Soviet Union systems that start out in gestation and then build up over 20 years and then are field tested and then finally are put in the field. We're not ready for off-the-shelf warfare. We can't do wide area surveillance. There's a simple reason for this. Back in the 70s, we didn't have the money, and so we had a choice between precision surveillance and wide area surveillance. And we went with precision surveillance to find Soviet missile silos. And that's great. But have you ever tried to do a wide area map where you're using postage stamps at different times of day, different angles of look, different seasons? It doesn't fucking work. Okay, we can't do the last mile. The United States government cannot see under jungle canopy. It cannot see into caves, but we like to use B-2 bombers to bomb caves, okay? B-2 bombers flying to the United States to bomb 18 assholes in a cave? This is a really expensive solution. We can't do real-time change detection. We have one really big fucking expensive national intelligence tribe, and we have completely pissed on all the other intelligence tribes. So, military, law enforcement, business, journalists, non-governmental organizations, religions, labor unions, citizen advocacy groups. The United States shuts all of those out of the equation. We chose to go with secrecy instead of sharing. Now that's changing. And I give the CIO for the DNI a lot of credit. He's the only asshole up there that knows what he's doing. Secrets are primarily valuable in the context of a rich, open-source knowledge foundation. You can't have smart spies in the context of a dumb nation. We have a nation that can't find the fucking next state, okay? Much less another country. Americans, I'm sorry to say, in Latin America they call us tontos utiles, useful idiots. That's what we are, okay? Present company accepted. Spies only know secrets. Think about that. Spies only know secrets. Spies only know 10 to 15% of reality. They only know what they've stolen. They don't know history. They don't know context. They don't know culture. They don't know political, legal, socioeconomic, ideocultural, techno-demographic, natural geographic, my first thesis 2 decades ago. Spies don't know what the fuck is going on. Let me quote George Tenet, intelligence prostitute first class, okay? George Tenet speaking to all of the Allied intelligence chiefs said, and I quote, "We don't know shit." I'm not making this up. So, don't send a spy where a schoolboy can go. Duh, as my 17-year-old would say. Now, other than the 3 guys who are sworn to secrecy, has anybody identified my son yet? God, you're a bunch of losers. Come on. You can identify him. Let's look at the eyes. Make sense or add value. America has gone wrong in 2 big ways. The first way has been to equate intelligence to secrets. Intelligence is not about secrets. Intelligence is about making sense. It's about understanding. The other way we have gone wrong, and General Ike Eisenhower warned us about this, is by allowing the military-industrial prison hospital complex to basically buy the government. The U.S. government no longer represents the people of the United States. This is it. This is $60 billion spent on, and I'm being generous here, 20% of the value, because the 80-20 rule is one that kind of works. But the reality is that we're spending $60 billion on the 5 to 10% of the information we can steal on the 7 to 9 targets that Dick Cheney thinks will sell fear. Okay? We are spending less than $60 million, no, less than $600 million on the other 85%. Now, I will tell you, I was a ghostwriter for the Marine Corps, and General Gray published an article called Global Intelligence Challenges of the 1990s. He published this article in 1988. And he said, we need to focus on terrorism, we need to focus on revolution, we need to focus on instability, we need to focus on all these other things that are destabilizing the world. Oh, by the way, open source intelligence is 85% of that. Nobody wanted to hear it. Not even from me, not even from the Commandant of the Marine Corps. This is the slide I've shown you before. Oh, okay, is Blondie here? We know she's not a real blonde. I love her. I mean, you want to hear sexism? Hey, Blondie, let's go have a drink and work it out. Okay. Let me explain it, and I will explain it. That's a good point. What I have done with this chart is taken the 10 threats that the United Nations has identified, and I've gone back in time and looked at all these policy books, Mandate for Change, everything the Democrats and the Republicans write with their lobbying for positions in the next administration. And I'm going to have to change this because I'm about to talk to every committee chairman on the Senate, so I'm going to have to add agriculture, among other things. But basically, if you look at this, we're fucked on debt, security, and water, and energy, and ecology. And then you have these big dogs here. We don't have a strategy for how do we help the big dogs avoid our mistakes. For example, China is in the business right now of selling cars to Chinese. This is about as fucking stupid as you can get. Okay? Because there are a lot of them. And China has got 300 water-stressed cities. All right, there are a lot of issues here. And so we don't have this strategy, this holistic strategy that tries to help people come to grips with reality. Now, some of you may not have been at my other speech, but I love Trotsky's statement, you know, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. Well, this administration may not be interested in reality, but I assure you, reality is interested in us. Okay? So, that's the end of the slideshow. Any questions? And this is completely improv. I'd like to get to bed by 1, but I'll do whatever you want me to do. And yes, sir, over there in the microphone.
Hi.
What? Lights! Camera! Action! I'm short, fat, and bald. I don't think I'm a movie star.
All right. So I'm sure that if I look on Amazon.com, you probably have a review up of it already. But have you read the Pentagon's new map, and do you think they're implementing some of the ideas in that book in the government?
I have read the Pentagon's new map. That book should have remained an article.
Yeah, it is. He does go
that
on.
is a well-meaning young man who has never read anything by anybody else, had some good ideas of his own. He has been overly influenced by Wall Street. I would place that book in about the 3rd rank.
Well, he does talk a lot about connecting the intelligence community back with the rest of the world.
Mostly what he talks about in that book is how fucked up the Pentagon process is, which is why I gave it an extra star. Okay? It's not a serious book. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
The 9/11 Truth Movement has several schools. One is the Keene-Hamilton Commission. That's the official conspiracy theory, and that's a conspiracy theory that the first school accepts. The second one is the official conspiracy theory, but with some questions. The next one, sir, is the one that says we knew it was going to happen, and there was a breakdown. And I think that's what you're alluding to, that we're stupid, we're incompetent. But, sir, the one that's the most extreme...
I'm not a sir, I'm a Robert.
Okay, Robert. Robert, the one that at first seems to be the most extreme, but upon investigation it's the one that's the least of all the conspiracy theories. It's the one that's the least outrageous. And that's that the one I told you before that you were referring to, if you were leading up to this, that we're incompetent, let it happen, lie hop, really is superseded upon those who really care about this tragedy, not only for the heartbreak within New York, but even in this moment what's happening with Israel and Lebanon is MyHop made it happen on purpose. That there's no laptop computer in a cave in Afghanistan and 18 people who may hate us like crazy but simply do not have the ability with box cutters to bring down a building. And
where are you going with this?
I want to know which school of... I want to know which school of thought you're in. Excuse me?
No, that's fine. Okay, stop right there. I'll answer your question. There are several converging themes in my judgment. Converging theme number 1 is that the U.S. intelligence community has consistently, over the last 50 years, and certainly over the last 18 years, when I first started this dogfight, and 18 years ago I discovered that 80 to 90% of what we needed to know about the real world was not secret, not in English, not online, and not known to anybody in Washington, including the menopausal grandmothers in the Foreign Broadcasting Information Service. Okay, and I use that insult deliberately. Unfortunately, they're managed by young white boys in button-down collars that don't know fuck all about the world. Okay, so theme number 1 is we've shut out 80% of the information that we needed to know in order to understand the extremist Wahhabism thing that was being pushed out. Theme number 2 is that the Central Intelligence Agency has been politicized for all too long, to the point that they have been forbidden to talk to opposition groups in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, and elsewhere. Okay? So CIA is basically a castrated service that is limited to talking to foreign liaison, which hands them what they want them to know. All right? There's a third theme here. And I've read most of the books. In fact, I have a list on Amazon on books indicting Dick Cheney for 9/11. Dick Cheney was in charge of an exercise on 9/11. He was in charge of the entire U.S. government. He was using the Secret Service as his communication and control channel. There is a strong body of literature that suggests that Dick Cheney decided that he wanted to let 9/11 happen. There is a strong body of literature that says that Dick Cheney very deliberately allowed George Bush to make an ass of himself by reading a book upside down and then moving him around the country so that Dick Cheney could stay in Washington and be in charge. It is my absolute judgment that Dick Cheney is impeachable, indictable, and criminally negligent. All right? Now, there are other sub-themes in the literature. The FBI is probably the most moronic, incompetent agency in the U.S. government. Okay? And by the way, I am not Agent Steele. Agent Steele is a guy with one leg, okay, and it's spelled S-T-E-A-L. And when I was woken up naked after flying in from Australia in Chicago, they quickly discovered I was not Agent Steele, okay? But they were beautiful, very young people. I'd love to meet the cheerleader again. The fact of the matter is that FBI and CIA have been dicking around with half-ass recruitments while shutting out people. It is a known, documented fact that there were 2 walk-ins to the FBI, one in Orlando, one in Newark, New Jersey, a year prior to 9/11. And these walk-ins revealed the entire 9/11 plot. They revealed the names of the people involved, but they were what we would call virgins. Okay? They weren't in the records. And the 9/11, the FBI people checked their records and said, oh, well, we've never heard of these people, so you must be a fucking asshole. Get out of here. That's the way the U.S. government works. So I guess I would sum this up by saying that right now the neoconservatives and the radical Islamic fundamentalists love each other because they are using the politics of fear to steal us blind.
But you didn't answer my question.
All right, what's your question? In one sentence.
LIHOP, let it happen, still presupposes that people who, half of who've been discovered, they're not 19 hijackers, half of them have been discovered, and any of them, even if they wanted to, they simply couldn't have.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying you're either LIHOP or MIHOP, and LIHOP is very destructive.
Can someone explain this question to me?
Let it happen on purpose. You're telling me that made it happen on purpose. Made it happen on purpose.
All right, next question.
I just ask for some humility because
All right,
Lebanon
next question.
wouldn't be in...
Thank you.
Good evening.
Are you going to do a striptease?
No.
I'll go first.
I don't think so, gentlemen. There you go.
God, she's gorgeous.
Right.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Good evening.
In any event, you were discussing the technological advancements going on within the CIA and what have you.
No, there are no technological advancements going on at CIA.
Okay. Let me start over then again. The former CIA directors did focus less on raw or human intelligence for a time, ground intel, and they focused more on technological advancements, satellites,
starting
what
with
have you.
Stansfield Turner.
Now, one can certainly see with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Iran what's going on there because there isn't much raw or human intelligence.
Right.
My question for you is this. How would you address this issue that because during a certain point the CIA did focus on that and now we're missing people in the field for human intelligence raw like that, how would you address that issue?
I actually have a press release on this topic. If you go to my website you will see a table of contents from my website. I realized I have 30,000 pages on my website, and it didn't occur to me until this year, after I had a very bad experience with Wikipedia, that nobody is fucking reading below level 1. So I've created a sortable table of contents, and in there you'll find a press release called Revitalizing the Clandestine Service. Here's what it boils down to. In the 1950s and 60s, we had a clandestine service that looked like the United Nations. You would walk into the CIA, and we used to separate the analysts who we didn't trust. I mean, when I was a case officer and I was taken up to see the analysts in the 1980s, my chief of station said, don't tell them a fucking thing. Okay? This is how CIA works. Today, the entire intelligence community has been completely destroyed by Negroponte and this 1,000-person bullshit promotion above the Peter Principle. There is a very simple answer to clandestine intelligence, which is white boys don't know shit. You have to have multilateral, multinational stations in which the Americans provide the money and the processing technology and the management, and indigenous allies provide the street officers. Now, the problem is that CIA is married to this concept of headquarters to headquarters liaison, which is basically code for headquarters assholes lying to headquarters assholes who don't know any difference. Okay? The DEA model is much better. The Drug Enforcement Administration takes officers from the individual countries and it puts them off on the side, and they bond as a band of brothers, and they do good shit together. And they keep their headquarters ignorant. This is the way to do it. All right? So if I were, and I've written several books on this. I mean, my first book on intelligence, spies, and secrecy in an open world has a chapter with 14 specific recommendations, which you can find for free on my website if you just flip through, you know, refresh until you see the free chapter. This is real simple. We need a national collection agency that can actually get out on the street and get down and dirty. And Raul Goresh has said very clearly, we don't do diarrhea. Okay? It's easy to penetrate the Taliban. All you do is you take an 18 to 21-year-old, say, we'll give you $1 million in 10 years. Go fuck up your life for 10 years and come back when you've got contact. Okay? This is not a problem. But we don't have anybody in America that wants to go do that except for this kid that Lyndon, whatever, that made it to Afghanistan, but he wasn't a CIA case officer or even an agent. He was just a dumb shit that wanted to go kill people. You have to have a clandestine. Well, first off, let me start with open source agency.
Okay.
You can't be a serious spy unless you first know everything that can be known legally and ethically. I will tell you on the heads of my 3 children, the U.S. government doesn't know fuck all about 80% of the information they need to know in 183 languages they don't speak. Sorry about that. That's your fault. Because you're not telling your government that you expect them to actually be in touch with reality. What we have right now, present company accepted, is pinheads electing pinheads. Okay? And I don't know how we're going to change that. I don't have answers. There was a wonderful quote downstairs about questions are good, answers are arrogant. You're right. Absolutely. I don't have answers. But one, you start with open source intelligence. So if I were DNI, I would have an open source agency. I'd fund it at $3 billion a year. And once I have everything that agency can give me, I would say to all the spies, I'd say, show me why you're worth a goddamn penny on top of open source. And I will guarantee you the National Reconnaissance Office, the National Security Agency, the Central Intelligence, and the National Geospatial Agency would all fail that test. 90% of what you need to know about the real world to make intelligent, strategic decisions is not secret. And we are just delusional. All right? You need a national processing agency. Intelligence is less than 10 to 15% of what you need to know. I want to turn NSA into a national processing agency where all the operational cables, all of the open source stuff, everything is part of this big mix. And the secrets are simply an add-on. You need a national analysis agency. And in fact, the problem with CIA is it only does secrets on hard targets. Our agricultural policy, our commercial policy, our energy policy, our health and human services policy, every single part of government is totally fucked because they're bureaucracies with private sector mafias that have no interest in facts and reality. They only have an interest in how they can make a buck and screw the U.S. citizen. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay. Next. God, you're gorgeous.
Yes, she is.
I'm sharing a room with my son, and I'm dysfunctional after 18 years of marriage. Next.
You had mentioned just now open source intelligence. In the past, you've told some great stories, and I'd love for you to tell them to this crowd as well. One that resonated with me, you mentioned, it's a perfect example of this phenomenon, the idea of tracking plagues before they happen by just looking at pharmacy receipts. And also
grocery stores. Illegal immigrants use grocery stores.
And also, if you want to tell everyone the story about the map warehouse, that's always a jaw-dropper, in my opinion.
Okay. You know, there is so much data out there, and I'm very, very interested as well as concerned about the way in which data is misused. I mean, you provide your information for one specific thing, and it ends up being accumulated by first choice or data point or whatever. But the reality is there's a lot of good that can be done with aggregate data. I am not opposed to what NSA was trying to do with pattern analysis on phone calls, okay? What most people don't realize is that 80% of signals intelligence is pattern analysis, not content analysis. But to the example, we can predict outbreaks of influenza and so forth in illegal alien communities by watching what's being sold on the grocery store drug shelves, because illegal immigrants go to the grocery store rather than a pharmacy or a doctor. And I am just absolutely awed by Larry Brilliant and Google.org. Larry Brilliant is probably going to win a Nobel Prize one of these days. He's in the process of using a little bit of Google Cash, 1% of their annual revenue, to plus up the global public health intelligence network, and it has intelligence in it. And one of the things that Google is doing massive surveys of blogs and other things and looking for references, and they're credited with identifying SARS early on. So this is extremely important. As far as the map thing, I think you're referring to the Chinese burning down the Russian warehouse? Okay, well, one of the problems with the U.S. government is we rely so heavily on satellite technology, we don't actually have maps for 90% of the world. And when I talk about maps, I'm talking about 1 to 50 combat charts with contour lines. This is important for infantry officers because it shows you things like defilade, which is how to get from point A to point B without being killed. This matters. We don't have these maps. When we went into Bosnia, the National Geospatial Agency was very proud of sending 16 laptop computers for 500,000 men with digital maps. 16 laptop computers for 500,000 men. What's wrong with this picture? Okay, anyway, the Russians did all of the Chinese maps, and we had a chance to buy them for $5 million, and both the National Geospatial Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency refused to spend the money. And the Chinese got wind of this, and they burned down the warehouse.
What was the level of detail?
1 to 50,000. 1 to 50,000 with contour lines. This is basically like in this room here you would have 4 contour lines, and that's really, really important. Next question.
Yeah, so I heard about public diplomacy and how it's basically been gutted in the later part of the Clinton years.
Yes, instead of blonde bimbo, I'm now using the term valley girl.
Okay, so you'd say it was.
What did he say?
You'd say.
Well, no, come on. What was that?
Oh,
no, behind you.
Yeah.
The heckler. What? The Robert Steele drinking game? I don't get it. I'm missing something here, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I just heard, where I heard about this kind of sob story about public diplomacy being gutted was from an undersecretary, or former undersecretary, but I guess your opinion is that it was relatively useless beforehand, the way that it was done?
I am very, very disappointed with the U.S. Department of State. First off, the U.S. Department of State is supposed to be the senior service. It's supposed to be the primary focal point for developing U.S. policy about foreign affairs. You unfortunately have several things running badly. The first is that the Department of State and I tried very hard for like the last 6 years to get the Department of State to understand that its original mission, its constitutional mission, is to collect, interpret, translate, disseminate, and explain all information in all languages all the time. They don't want to do it. They're a microcosmic bureaucracy that wants to be an end user of intelligence, not a collector of intelligence, and they simply don't compute the fact that the embassies overseas, which are now fortresses that shut out everybody, are supposed to be our eyes and ears for the 80 to 90% of the information that is legally and ethically available. Most of our State Department officers do not speak the foreign language properly. They don't get out beyond the cocktail circuit. Your average embassy, the expense account basically is 1/4 for the ambassadors, 1/4 for the 4 political, economic, consular, and whatever counselors, and the last half spread across 100 officers, which means that your average Foreign Service officer gets to host 2 lunches and 1 reception every quarter. Okay? And they're not given the time and the money to travel into the provinces. So the State Department is essentially a castrated beast that relies on handouts from people who are willing to be seen with Americans for free. This is not good. Condi Rice is as great a white girl as Bill Clinton is a black man. Okay? She is absolutely worthless. In fact, she's so worthless, she's worse than Madeleine Albright. Okay? Madeleine Albright deliberately repressed reports on terrorism because Madeleine Albright wanted to pretend that everything was on the right track. And we have bin Laden today because Madeleine Albright didn't have the balls to go after the terrorists, and Bill Clinton didn't have the balls to go after the terrorists when they blew up 2 embassies in the USS Cole and Kambar Towers, which is directly traced to Iran, according to the FBI director's memoirs.
Okay. Thank you.
Can someone teach me the Robert Steele drinking game?
Anything over a 6 on the crazy scale.
Anything over... And does the crazy scale go to 10 or 15?
Do you think there's something especially wrong with the U.S. intelligence agency if when the Pentagon was attacked and there is only one camera that is capturing this footage and there's no evidence of any plane of any sort?
Conspiracy theory. I am actually among those who is willing to believe that Donald Rumsfeld had a missile targeted into an unoccupied area of the Pentagon.
You're actually willing to believe this?
Yes, I am. But I have no proof. But I will tell you that I see no plane parts and I see no bodies.
Well, what's going on in like the CIA when this is a...
The CIA is not responsible for perimeter security for the Pentagon.
What about the FBI or any intelligence agency? How come they never investigated this?
Have you considered the possibility that Dick Cheney doesn't want them to?
Why? Because he actually orchestrated the attacks himself?
I don't know if he orchestrated the attacks. I believe it's something similar to John Kennedy's assassination, where defenses were let down for a very good reason. I will remind all of you that Operation Northwood was sponsored by the Joint Chiefs of Staff as a pretext to invade Cuba. American general officers and lieutenant colonels and colonels suggested the murder of Americans in the United States of America back in the 60s in order to justify an attack on Cuba. This is how bad our system gets. Do not underestimate the potential mendacity of your government at the political level. Not at the bureaucratic level, but at the political level. Yes, sir.
Okay, Robert, it's always fascinating to see you fooling the hacker community now in year 12.
Fooling the hacker community?
Yeah, I think it should be time with your charade. I mean, you can fool some flag waver and left gatekeeper script kiddies, but not realists. Fact is, 9/11 was an inside job. The scientific facts speak clearly for them. You only here for the only purpose to re-script the negligence theory.
I'm only here for the sex.
Your jokes go... And sex. Me too. Me too. I'm pro-sex. I'm pro-sex. Steele, Okay, good. First of all, no planes hit any target. That we can prove from forensic evidence and visual evidence. Tomorrow we'll speak out on the visual evidence. Source? Oh, TV. As usual, the
He's
TV.
holding a special session. He will be speaking tonight at 4 in the morning
Yeah, no,
in that room over there.
I speak it tomorrow from 10 to 12 and can prove and will show that the
I'll
that
be
the
on an
broad,
airplane
yeah,
at the
you
time.
you can come there and all your other spooks. And by the way, the book you're referring to was Mike Rupert, another spook. Fact is, how long you want to continue with this charade, playing the big guy on negligence theories, while you exactly know that the scientific evidence alone speak for an inside job. Controlled demolition, building 1, 2, and 7. And then we have the TV fakery, which clearly proves that the live broadcast was contradicting each other and shows completely two different aircraft silhouettes. It's a CGI, computer-generated image. And if you make fun of it, don't worry about it, because this is the most...
Who the fuck are you to say I'm making fun of it?
Oh,
Let me shut your fucking mouth.
Okay,
Let me
but
tell
I
you
want
what's
you to
going
make
on.
fun of it.
Shut up.
Make fun of it.
Shut
Make fun
up.
of it.
I will give you time to respond.
Why?
Shut up.
Okay, I have you.
Shut up.
Here's
and
my
I will
question.
speak for 2 minutes. Shut
Here's
up.
my question.
Shut the fuck up, and then we'll get your question.
Why is this evidence not in US mainstream media while everything else is? Why is the evidence on 9/11 TV fakery not in US mainstream media while the complete 9/11 truth movement is even on CNN?
Because we're stupid, moronic idiots that don't give a shit.
No, that's not true. They won't.
All right.
They
Shut
won't
up and
actually
let me give you a serious
they
answer.
said, oh, make better jokes instead of shutting me up. Why are you not here to say...
Tired, not even wired. Okay, be quiet. I'll talk.
Okay, 2 minutes.
There is a very credible literature, and obviously you haven't read all of my reviews.
I read everything. I'm just day one, okay?
No. You haven't read my reviews. Give the microphone to someone else. You're done. I will answer your question. You have not read my reviews. You have not read my reviews of the last 25 books on 9/11. I actually have a list. You know what a list is on Amazon? I have a list. Do you know what a list on Amazon is? All right, then shut the fuck up and go read my list. Because there is a list. Shut up! There is a list on Amazon. There is a list on Amazon by Robert Steele on books that hold Dick Cheney accountable for 9/11. Okay? One of the things, just shut the fuck up, you're boring. There is definite positive evidence that requires an indictment of Dick Cheney and the 9/11 Commission, which had a lot of conflicts of interest. Every single person on the 9/11 Commission violated the congressional mandate that they not have conflicts of interest. There is absolutely, definitely a requirement to look into this at a popular level, just like the Warren Commission blew the Kennedy assassination, completely covered it up. The 9/11 Commission has covered up all of the problems in the U.S. government. There is definite evidence suggesting an indictment, but not necessarily a conviction. That the FBI, for example, was running the Blind Sheik in New York as an asset. And that the FBI was, in fact, the one who created the car bomb for the World Trade Center in the first place. And there is definite evidence that the original plan to attack the World Trade Center was, in fact, a plan to have a nuclear catastrophe. But in a negotiation with Pakistan, and because the Al-Qaeda was reasonable, Al-Qaeda is a reasoned enemy. They pulled back from nuclear because it might get out of control. And they went for this cultural target. So there are no clear answers. There is certainly a great deal of information that suggests that we have been deceived by our government, that this has not been fully investigated, and that it requires additional investigation at a popular level. I hope that's a satisfactory answer for you. Next question.
Robert, I want to say thank you.
Someone in charge, I need another pitcher of water.
Hey,
or
give
vodka,
that man another six-pack,
whatever
please.
this is.
Robert, I want to thank you for sharing your brilliance here.
It's not brilliance, it's attitude.
Well, an attitude too, baby. The question I had was about 9/11, and on Building 7, there's a lot of,
good question.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that said there's some controlled charges there, and then there's some people that actually were named as the people flying the airplanes actually came back to the embassies and say, hey, that wasn't me. Here I am. I'm here.
Yeah.
Can you address, is there any sources?
Let me take that in two parts.
Okay, thank you.
Part number one is these were not all Saudis. These were people on Saudi passports. Part number two is a lot of these people were trained at U.S. military bases. Part number three is we are not at all certain that the people who are claimed to have been on the airplanes actually died on the airplanes. Part number four is that the CIA building, the Secret Service building, Secret Service, Dick Cheney, okay? There was no reason for World Trade Center building number 7 to collapse as it did.
Right.
There is, in Crossing the Rubicon and other books that I have read, I do read, there is some suggestion that there was a Pentagon-installed controlling thing on these airplanes, and Boeing and others have developed capabilities to actually fly airplanes from here to Australia and back without pilots. There is some small evidence worthy of investigation but not conclusion that these airplanes were actually on override control from World Trade Center 7, and that the reason World Trade Center 7 was destroyed was to conceal all of this stuff. Thank you, sir. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that I don't trust my government.
Right. So as an intelligence officer, and what do you think?
There's a difference between intelligent and intelligence officer.
This is true. This is very true. But as an intelligent man, what's your opinion on the best way that we as people can have a good dialogue without getting too emotional about it, but bringing facts and not sarcastic innuendos? It's fun to do that just to have fun, you know, if we want to have a little fun. But in reality, to really get the truth rolling and find the accountabilities where we can. What's your best process on that? And thank you.
All right. I have said publicly, and I'm not a big shot, you know. I'm a guy that just survives on a salary and tries to do this stuff, and you're actually my most receptive audience, and that's a sorry-ass state of affairs. I have said publicly that we need 2 Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. We need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission on all the bad shit we've done overseas, including preventing Iran from having its elected people and the nationalization of its oil. We have created many of these problems ourselves. We have sown the dragon's teeth. We also need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission here at home. Wall Street has deliberately screwed the working poor and the middle class. And we seem to just take it because in the past there was enough wealth to kind of keep us in beer and cigarettes and gasoline, and now that's all going away. It's the end of cheap oil. It's the end of free water. Disease is prevalent. There are a lot of things going on. I don't know what it's going to take. I am, in fact, despite my gloom and doom, Outlook. Beside my doom and gloom slideshow, I'm actually optimistic. I think, and if you look at my website, oss.net, you've got a public daily brief. This public daily brief is free. The president's daily brief costs $60 billion a year, and he can't read it. Okay? So in that, when you click on that, you'll see a change on policy curve. I think we're right at the cusp. Okay, I've spent 18 years flatlining, and I think we're now about to go up. And we're not about to go up because of me. We're about to go up because of the Internet, because of Google, because of Doug Engelbart's open hypertext document system, because of semantic web and synthetic information, because citation analysis is moving to the paragraph and microcache level. There's a whole bunch of things that are about to start happening, and that's all good. So I've lost my train of thought. What was your question?
The original person.
Yeah, go back. Oh, how do we do it systematically? Well, this group is well known for ignoring me. In 1994, I suggested that they create a server and that they start cataloging all flaws in all systems and giving the manufacturers 30 days and then posting them publicly. And there are a number of places that do that now. But I think this group specifically has lost the opportunity to be a major force in cleaning up the environment. And I'd also like to find spam killers. I mean, I'm talking guys who will identify spam killers by their physical address and then go in and burn down the place. There's a lot of good that could be done there. I get 185,000 spam a day, and it's cleaned in Sweden, and I see what's left over. But I think, I honest to God believe that collective intelligence, the wisdom of the crowds, enabled by the internet and the social networking that can occur as a result of the internet, I think in the next 3 to 10 years we're going to see an incredible difference to the point that people like Dick Cheney can be tarred and feathered in cyberspace. In cyberspace. And one of the things that I'm very excited about, and I'll come to you in a second, one of the things I'm very excited about is the concept of retrospective indictment. And I spoke about this very briefly the other day. In 1975 to 1979, the U.S. Senate and the White House knew everything they needed to know about peak oil ending. And they chose to cover it up in order to keep the bribes coming and in order to keep American citizens, happy on free gas and so forth. That was treason. I think one of the things that we need to do is start to retrospectively evaluate every government decision in the past 20 years. And we need to literally, and I'm not saying hang them, jail them, whatever, we need to literally out every asshole in the U.S. government in the past 20 years. Okay? And I don't mean send them to jail.
How can you do that? Who's going to run the government? No one's left.
You.
Another asshole to replace that asshole.
Only. I really believe in campaign reform, and I think the big problem that we have right now is that the people have gotten lazy, and they elect someone and they let them go, and then they forget about it. One of the interesting things about the internet is, and I love the book No Logo, because it talks about people attaching themselves leech-like to corporations and basically holding those corporations accountable. It's not the government surveillance of you that we need to worry about. It's our surveillance of the government that has enormous potential.
Robert, I have to interrupt for a moment. I'd just like to remind all our esteemed guests that if they would take a look at the back page of our program, we ask that everybody respects the no excessive heckling rule, and if another incident happens again, we're going to have to cut this early. So please...
Beat the shit out of them. Okay, go on. Next.
I'd be happy to throw at the hecklers, but we give everybody a chance.
That's all right. I'm cool. And no one has identified my son yet, so I don't have to give away the keys to the Jaguar. This was actually Emmanuel's first prize in 1994, for those of you that are new to this. And the person that won the keys to the Jaguar asked, well, where's the Jaguar? And Emmanuel said, I don't know.
Hey, how's it going? I'm not really going to try to flame bait or anything like that, as it were.
I'm interested in answering what...
Oh, yeah.
I'm the entertainment, which is pretty sad.
Sure. Well, the basic question is going to appeal more to the geek and, the cause of the conference. Anyway, how do you suggest, you say we got to monitor more open source sources out on the IC, and you got to say the IC's got to scrutinize all these threat streams that are coming in from God knows where. How do you say that we scrutinize unsubstantiated reporting from people who walk in on the first time and say, this is going to happen? Thanks.
Well, I actually believe that the one really great thing about the intelligence community is what's called the proven process of intelligence. That's requirements definition, what do you need to know, collection management, farming it out, source discovery and validation, which is very important, multi-source fusion, and then compelling presentation. One of the problems we have today is that all of the departments of government that are not supported by the CIA, in fact, actually everyone is ignoring the CIA today, including the Pentagon, most especially. But the key here is that government is on automatic pilot. It's a bureaucracy. Now, I believe that sources that come in with unsubstantiated information need to be put in context. And one of the reasons that I'm sponsoring or hoping to sponsor 50 state community intelligence centers and networks is because I believe that there's an awful lot of information that can come from the bottom up that needs to be evaluated at the county level and the state level. And at the same time, these centers can serve as channels for global reality coming down to schoolhouses and chambers of commerce and so forth. The bottom line here is there is nothing about intelligence that says that it has to be secret. If you understand intelligence as decision support, with the proven process of intelligence as the way in which you do decision support, then you realize that there's an awful lot that we can do to improve government at all three levels, to improve corporations. I mean, I personally believe that corporations should no longer be independent personalities. I think that the individual managers need to be held accountable for corporations, and I think that so I don't know if I've answered your question, but I do believe the major change, the two major changes I want to make in the U.S. intelligence community, and I say this with humility because no one is ever going to fucking let me do this, are number one, and I've written this in Forbes.com, we need to start with what we can know from open sources and what we can learn from others. The U.S. intelligence community starts with what it can see from a satellite and what its agents can steal, and it tries to divine reality without any attention to what other people can tell it. So number one is start with open source. Number two, go what the Swedes call M4IS, multinational, multi-agency, multidisciplinary, multi-domain information sharing. Sharing, not secrecy, is the operative paradigm for the 21st century. The intelligence community still doesn't get it. Does that answer your question? Okay, next.
I was curious about your opinion on a different matter. It's sort of related to the 9/11 stuff, but what is your opinion on Al-Qaeda as an organization? Because I'm sure you've heard of the Power of Nightmares.
Of the what?
The Power of Nightmares.
I'm sorry, the what?
The Power of Nightmares.
Oh, yeah. Nice movie. Someone gave me a DVD today.
Yes. And I'm curious what you think of the idea that Al-Qaeda
politics
is
of fear
association rather than actual origin.
Although I believe my CIA colleagues when they say they did not fund Al-Qaeda directly, when we did Afghanistan, we really did not understand the power of three different things. We didn't understand that we were unleashing a Pandora's box of Islamic fundamentalism. We were basically training them in how to take down the Soviet Union, a power they then turned on us. Number two, we didn't understand the value of the Taliban's repressing the opium production in Afghanistan. Under U.S. leadership, Afghanistan is now responsible for 80% of the opium in the world. The warlords are rich beyond their wildest dreams, and Pakistan is processing this opium to level 4 and making a bundle, which helps sponsor its nuclear program. We also didn't understand the relationship between Wall Street and drugs. Drugs provide Wall Street with its liquidity, and there is in fact a recorded visit of the chairman of the Security Exchange Commission to Colombia in what is called the ultimate cold call. He went down to see the leaders of the FARC to suggest that they invest their drug money in Wall Street. This is about as fucking immoral as I can think. Is there more that you want?
Yeah, my question was more along the lines of its organizational structure.
I think Al-Qaeda is an idea rather than an organization. And it's an idea that has blossomed. Southern Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, India. I'll tell you what, those 8 bombs in India really fucked up American call centers. And Al-Qaeda is not stupid. They are going after the call centers. They are going after the foreign pipelines. They may one day go after water. What we've gotten ourselves into is a situation, a 100-year six-front war, in which America the good is no longer a defense, because we've given up on America the good. We have given these people... I wish. I hope. You know, when you live in a glass house, it's a really bad idea to throw stones.
Do you think the London bombings were associated?
I think the London bombs were Hezbollah, and that's what I told Scotland Yard. I think Iran is running rings around our ass. Iran, they're not ragheads. They are really smart dudes. And by the way, I think most of Iran is about nationalism, not about threatening the United States. Next.
Yeah, hey. You've talked a lot more in this conference about Dick Cheney and the role you think he's played. You remarked in 2004 that you actually thought he was going to be gone as Bush's running mate in the 2004 election. Why do you think it didn't turn out that way?
I underestimated Bush's stupidity. I'm serious. It's just unbelievable. And if you read the book 1% Doctrine, one of the things that Ron Susskind does very well is he documents how Dick Cheney has experimented with dictating policy without consulting the president all the way back to President Ford. Dick Cheney has a track record of basically usurping the power of the president he serves. And unfortunately, George Bush is just fucking dumb enough to let Dick Cheney do a lot of damage.
Hi, Mr. Steele. I'd like to thank you tremendously for being here once again.
I expect you guys to throw me out, but my son will be back and you won't know who he is.
At any rate, I have two brief questions, if that's all right. First of all, I was wondering if you could share any thoughts, views, or opinions you might have as to why roughly 400 plus skeletons were found on the HSBC building near Ground Zero. This past February.
Don't know.
Sorry?
No, I have no idea.
Okay, that was in all the local media, ABC, CBS, and NBC.
I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. That's perfect fair. Also, I was wondering if you could describe to me your thoughts on the importance of net-centric or network-centric warfare versus urban warfare in the coming decades.
Well, what I think I want to do there is point you to Max Manwaring. I believe that belief systems are the seventh generation of warfare. And America has been largely oblivious to belief systems for the last 20 years, actually forever. We completely missed the fact that from 1988 onwards, the Saudi Arabians were sponsoring a very virulent form of extremist Islamism. And Americans are simply not paying attention. We are not focusing on this. And I will tell you, I mean, Howard Bloom, who lives here in New York, is a friend of mine, and he's written a wonderful book called Global Brain, as well as Lucifer's Principle. It all boils down to national power is based on the cumulative brain power of its citizens, combined with a cumulative aggregate understanding of what everyone else's brain power is thinking. And we have really blown it. I mean, one of the sub-themes, one of the lists that I have on Amazon is about anti-Americanism and blowback. I mean, I used to think the Bush-Cheney administration was stupid. Now I think they're just venal, and they actually have a strategy, and they know what they're doing. They're getting exactly what they want. But belief systems is where it comes down to. And if we can't speak all these languages, and if we give our citizenship away to every asshole that comes in and refuses to learn English, then fuck us. We're not paying attention to our national integrity, to our national character. You may not like this, but I think we need to bring back universal service with one distinction. You can choose the Peace Corps over the Army.
I agree with that.
When I was a Marine, we had dark green Marines and light green Marines. And that was an extremely important coming of age for me. This country has lost its cohesion. So I think belief systems is where net-centric warfare, it's not about computers. Any moron can do without a computer. It's about thinking. It's about understanding. It's about knowing intuitively what the right thing to do is. There's a book called The Cheating Culture. America is a cheating culture today. Everybody that can cheats. And that is a prescription for self-immolation in every possible respect. What?
Look at Rome. Rome collapsed not because of outside power. They collapsed from the inside out.
He's saying Rome collapsed from the inside out. I agree. We are collapsing from the inside out. The only good thing about Bush, and I said this in May of 2004 when I said why I would vote for Bush instead of Kerry, apart from his wife and his haircut. Kerry would be a placebo. Bush is radicalizing. I had no idea how radicalizing he would be. But I honest to God believe that Bush is a gift from heaven because he is pissing off so many people we might actually finally get our act together again.
Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Yes, sir.
Hi, you're one of the main reasons. You're one of the main
Suck
reasons.
the microphone.
Like this?
Yes. Make love to it. Never mind whose saliva's on it from before.
You're one of the top reasons that I come to Hope every year. And
oh, that's sad. But God bless you. Thank you.
not really, but I meant not really.
Then
sad.
you're a bullshit artist. What's your question?
You just chastise us, I believe, for two things, or for at least two things. One of which is not building a kind of database of manufacturing flaws and holding manufacturers accountable, and also for not making spammer assassins as well as spam assassin. I want to change that. I don't want to come to the next Hope and have you chastise us for the same thing. Can we open some kind of way of dialogue so that we can communicate to you more than once every 2 years?
My email is bear@oss.net, and if you put in the subject line Hope, I will read it and answer it.
Thank you.
I have two questions. The first one is, can you identify, I guess, the top three...
Is this Jolt Cola? What is it? Hang on a second. I have to evaluate this thing that I've been given. What is this? Is it a cheap beer? I'm holding out for the good stuff. Go on. Thank you.
Could you just recap for us who you think the top three...
You're not going to get me drunk.
Okay. The top three elected or appointed good guys within the government currently, if they exist. And the second question I have is, at what point do you think you'll reach the level where you will become victim of a frame job or an engineered accident?
Well, let me take those one at a time. I don't know the top people in government personally well enough to say good things about them. I think that John McCain used to be one of my top people, as did Colin Powell. But John McCain has become a born-again Bushophile, and I think he's too willing to sell out to the evangelical lunatics in order to be the Republican candidate. But I admire John McCain very much, as I continue to admire Colin Powell. And if Colin Powell were to make a resurgence and come back and basically say, I screwed up, I would trust him to be a good person. Tony Zinni, Marine Corps General Tony Zinni, is a gem waiting to be discovered by America. Tony Zinni taught me that relationships matter. And I have a very low social IQ. And I'm telling you, he really made me understand that you cannot be in relationship with nations unless you're in relationship with people at the individual level, at every level of those nations. So Tony Zinni, I think, gets my vote for top candidate for the future. Everyone else, they're losers. They're basically prostitutes that have sold out to keep their jobs. And I'm very interested in seeing if 2006 causes kind of a turnover of the incumbencies, and I don't know. Now, as far as getting an accident, I think that the Dick Cheneys of the world think that I'm a trivial... In fact, I'm not even sure they know who... Actually, I know they know I'm alive, but I have challenged the DNI to an intelligence duel through press releases. He very wisely chose not to answer, but I won such a duel before the Aspen Brown Commission with 6 phone calls. I have faxed the White House, and on my website you'll find a couple of letters that I sent to Condi Rice early on, a couple of them responding to questions she had, and one of them tarring her. I mean, when Condi Rice said the dissent is treason, I instantly knew she was an idiot in the bottom line fundamental sense of the word. Okay, I mean, to say that dissent is treason is selling out in the worst possible way. I don't think I'll have an accident. I think I'm getting much healthier. I'm 54 years old. I drink less. I'm on medication. It helps. And I have a loving family and a saint for a wife. So I don't think I'll have an accident. I think you guys are more dangerous than I am.
I actually just have one quick follow-up question to that. If you could pick any one appointed position within the government to be appointed to, what would it be?
I would be torn between being the president's 24/7 valet, so that I could literally be, I want to hear and see everything he hears and sees and then whisper in his ear as he goes to his wife at night. What? Nah, you know what? The football is bullshit. We're not even sure it'll work. Although I have considered being Director of National Intelligence, and I would probably like that because it's a massive slush fund that I could cut by 2/3 and do a lot of good elsewhere. My dream in life is to be Director of the Open Source Agency, but with a difference. I want the Open Source Agency, and I don't think this will happen, but I want the Open Source Agency to be a fourth branch of government that is independent of both the legislature and the White House, that has a budget that is 1% of the national disposable income, that has a director appointed for life, and that has a board of overseers that are retired presidents, speakers of the House, leaders, whatever, Bob Dole. I mean, basically my dream would be Clinton, Dole, the ghost of Tip O'Neill, and Sandra Day O'Connor as the chairman. And the job of this agency is to do what CIA is supposed to do. The truth shall make you free. CIA has blown it. I think the Open Source Intelligence Agency is capable of making America free by making public intelligence a reality, and I mean that down to the schoolhouse and Chamber of Commerce level. I will never get my dream. I don't think. Thank you. Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, I think you actually just answered my question. I was actually going to ask about the Open Source Center at the CIA, which was created a few months ago.
I haven't answered your question. That is a crock of shit. I mean, we're talking not just lipstick on the pig, but really badly applied, ugly lipstick of the wrong color.
Okay, now you've answered my question.
They have 7 people with bad Arabic following Arabic websites.
7 people. How does that work?
Because the CIA security people won't allow you to recruit anybody who has parents living overseas. Look, I'm in a dogfight. Congressman Simmons, who I've supported for many years, has proposed legislation. I may or may not publish it on my website soon. I want his permission first. But he has proposed legislation that would convert the Open Source Center, which is the foreign broadcast information service that has fought me for 18 years, into the Open Source Agency. Now, let me tell you something. When you promote a CIA culture with CIA security officers and CIA legal and CIA personnel and CIA mindsets to that point, and you leave it under the Director of National Intelligence, have you guys already heard the analogy about the throwaway camera? All right, real quick. In The Innovator's Solution, wonderful book, he talks about how when the throwaway camera, the disposable camera, was invented, the inventors went to the camera shops and tried to get them to sell it. The last thing they wanted to do was sell cheap cameras. So they went to the grocery store. Okay? The Open Source Agency is the disposable camera of the information and communications age. The last people in the world you want to have run it are the assholes who have $60 billion a year for secrets. So I am working up on the Senate side, countering legislation. Then these two competing legislations go to conference, and hopefully somewhere in there it comes out right. But I'm working up countering legislation which is showing the chairman of all of the different jurisdictions of the Senate that what they really need is an open source agency that is completely independent of the spies, that is able to provide high quality public intelligence to agriculture, energy, environment, EPA. You see what I'm going with this, okay? The disposable camera cannot be controlled by the spies. I have been a spy. I know how fucked up it is. Real quick, and then we'll go here.
Sorry to interrupt. How much of that $60 billion is actually black that we don't even know about or goes on?
Well, that's 60 billion. That's my best guesstimate. It's somewhere between 50 and 70. I think 60 is actually low. That is the total budget of the National Reconnaissance Office, which builds really shitty satellites over a long period of time. The National Geospatial Agency, which is spending all of its money trying to... See, you got to understand, the National Geospatial Agency spent most of its money trying to convert postage stamps from precision satellites into wide area maps. This is not a prescription for success. National Security Agencies in the 1970s, I think personally, this is wild speculation, I think less than 20% of their information is actually online. They've got all these reels of tape and stuff. Their linguists are enlisted people at the 2 to 3 level on a scale of 5, okay? We're not talking serious here. $60 billion on intelligence is bullshit, and $600 billion on a heavy metal military is also bullshit.
You've talked about how...
Somewhere in here I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, you've talked about how lack of accountability, government accountability...
Never mind.
You've talked about the lack of accountability in government
yes.
and corporate accountability. So what would you suggest... I mean, are we going to get to a point where essentially the public has to engage in information warfare against its own government and against corporations in order to make them accountable?
I don't call it information warfare. I call it information peacekeeping.
What? Okay. Well, if I could just quickly relate an experience I had recently, in which I tried to make a corporation accountable for the service that I was paying for. I was basically threatened with being arrested by airing the fact that I was unhappy with the service I was getting, that I had paid for. So I find that there seems to be this sort of corporate bullying going on when you try to make them accountable to what they're supposed to be selling you. But it's to a level that I'm older than.
I'll tell you. Let me go quickly.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's a level that is disturbing me more now than it has in the past. And the other thing is, I'm curious about your thoughts, your opinions on Richard Clarke and North Korea.
All right. Number one, I think that selective purchasing is the single best thing we've got going for us, and I credit that idea to No Logo. But I think Zalman is great. Is that his name, Stallman? Stallman, I read his book in the morning and listened to him in the afternoon, and that was absolutely great. Don't become captive to the beast. Why the hell do we need 10 brands of ketchup? There's selective purchasing and judicious use. I mean, I love the Wired magazine article about how RFID is going to get to the point where you can point your Trio at something that says, if you eat me, I'll kill you. That's good. I think we're getting there. Now, Dick Clark is an extremely intelligent, world-class asshole who did his job. And I respect him very much. And his book was very good. And Dick Clark was ignored and denigrated by Bill Clinton and whoever Bill Clinton's vice president was. Who was it? Oh, no. He sponsored the legislation that named the Internet. Okay, anyway, Al Gore. These guys had Madeleine Albright. Tony Lake is a moron. These people, Tony Lake didn't write his book on 6 threats until he was leaving the White House and decided he had to make a name for himself. These people were so out of touch with reality, it was unbelievable. And just in passing, I will mention that Bill Clinton got impeached for lying about a blowjob. And we still haven't impeached anyone here for stealing 2 elections, starting an elective war, lying to Congress, the United Nations, and the public, and 1 or 2 other high crimes and misdemeanors. This country is totally out of whack. North Korea is not a threat, and neither is Cuba. As of a year ago, the Treasury Department had 90 cases on terrorism and 900 cases on exports to Cuba. Okay? The fastest way to take care of North Korea and Cuba is to open the borders. And shut down the idiot exiles in Miami. Okay?
One comment.
Yes.
Yeah, one comment and 2 questions.
Hang on, what?
Sorry.
Great. Hang on. You guys let's do you 3 guys real quick, and then I'm going to go to the bathroom because what goes in must come out. And then I can either stand up here, I could do it privately, whatever you guys want. I want to be as helpful to you as possible.
All right, I'll try and be as brief as I can. The comment, first off, Emmanuel wrote in his travelogue to Cuba that the same thing you just expressed, that the best thing to do would be to open the borders to Cubans.
And be the first guy to buy one of those 54 Chevys.
Absolutely. Second question, I don't know how to go about saying this besides being blunt. I've considered actually running for politics, except the sheer amount of bullshit that's involved as running as an independent, or the fact that there would be at least some sort of party influence in running as a party candidate, makes it really impossible for someone who's not a pinhead to even be on the ballot for the pinheads to choose.
It really is terrible.
So how would someone go about doing that?
I don't have an answer, but I will tell you that there's a book called The Power and the Ambition, which persuaded me I never wanted to run for office, at least under these circumstances. The Power and the Ambition is about the way in which Newt Gingrich set about destroying Speaker Wright. And it was a very deliberate assassination attempt that succeeded. The other thing that book taught me is that our congressmen don't really work for us. They spend 3/4 to 4/5 of their time with their hand out as prostitutes. And that's not good. I will go back to Thomas Kuhn's Structure Scientific Revolution. You would have thought that 9/11 would be a paradigm shift. You would have thought that Katrina would be a paradigm shift, but it wasn't. I think what we're going to need is a constellation of a nuclear event on the East Coast, Los Angeles falling into the sea, which might be a good thing, Texas running out of water. These things are all coming at us. When they hit us, I don't know. But I have a real belief in the resurgency of the American people. And so I'm kind of throwing up my hands, and I'm glad I have a job that pays me enough to put food on the table. But I'm very, very upset about the larger context. And I really believe the United Nations has it right on these 10 threats. And it should be significant to you that the U.S. government doesn't give a shit about 8 of the 10 threats and is using the other 2 for the politics of fear.
And then my final question has to do with, one of those 2 quote-unquote threats. If magic voodoo, whatever you want to call it, you had the call on what would happen in Iraq, what would you do? And we don't need specifics, just sort of in broad swaths to say.
I will tell you right now that based on my reading, having not been in Iraq personally, but based on my extensive reading, we blew Iraq when Paul Bremer decided to become the proconsul. His first 2 decisions were, 1, no Ba'athist can be in power, and 2, disband these hundreds of thousands of people with rifles and leave them destitute. How fucking stupid is that? We lost Iraq when we turned from liberator to occupier. We lost Iraq because President Bush and Dick Cheney didn't have the personal integrity to listen to Army General Shavlaki, or whatever his name is, who said, we know how to do peace transitions after war, but we need this and this and this. And I'm very impressed by a book called The End of Iraq, in which Ahmed Chalabi, who, by the way, was fired by CIA for being a thief and a liar, Chalabi basically managed to suck up. And I believe that Chalabi was an Iranian agent of influence. And the best agents of influence get to the morons with preconceived notions and feed those notions. So America was sucked into Iraq. I imagine this. We took care of Afghanistan and Iraq, the 2 major enemies of Iran, and they haven't spent a dime. Okay? How stupid can we be? All right, the guy in the orange shirt is the last guy because I'm fit to burst. So I'll take your question, and then I'll go to the bathroom, and then I'll do whatever you guys want. All right, if you want me to come back to the podium, I will, for as few of you as wish. Yes, sir.
This is actually going to be a bit of a multi-part question.
No! Please! I can't do it!
I can ask later. Huh? Yeah, I can ask.
He would give me shit. What's your question? Why don't you ask one question, I'll go to the bathroom, and then you can ask the other one. So that'll kind of give us continuity of operations.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if that would work because it's a bit of a tangent.
I'm dying here.
You going over.
All right, I'm going to the back. And I think you can do that. I think this group has the power to become a virtual police force. Or not, police force is not the right word. Consumer, what's exactly? All right, we're rolling. Okay, so the Mossad. There is a Mossad agent here. Wait a minute. I thought you only drank when I said open source. Well, you know, Peter Drucker talks about what are called monomaniacs, and Ropp, who is the other major hacker leader, was telling me he has a 3 to 4 year attention span. Well, I have a 25-year attention span. And I've got 7 years to go. So you'll hear open source again. But about the Mossad, they're very good in a narrow area. They're not as global as CIA, but CIA is more bureaucratic. Anyone trying to work out of an embassy is stupid. And Mossad has one big thing going for it, which is that most Jews consider themselves Jews first and citizens second. And there's a term for them. It's called seyonim. And Jews will be quite happy to accommodate the Mossad with intelligence on their coworkers, with safe houses, with other accommodations, thinking they're being loyal to Israel and not tell the FBI. Now, the Mossad has run operations in the United States across America. They had a whole bunch of art students basically running scare operations on the Drug Enforcement Administration. There is credible evidence that the Mossad is using drugs into America as a means of financing itself off budget. Okay, now I would like to have a really strong counterintelligence service. I will be a class guy. When I catch one of these shitheads, they'll get a first-class seat out of town. No notice. But I think the Mossad, the Chinese, the Germans, even the French, for Christ's sake, are making fools of us. And the FBI is clueless. The FBI has no fucking idea what's going on in this country. And that's sad. All right, sir. We're on.
The first thing I'd like to ask is to inquire if you're familiar with any of George Soros's literature on globalization in international affairs.
I've read and favorably reviewed a couple of his books.
Okay. Then I'd also like for you to comment on specifically some of his suggestions on the modifications of the international economic organizations and their use of, the specific modifications of the use of special drawing rights to increase both the amount of foreign aid given as well as the way it's directed towards it to make it more effective as well as disconnect it from its current usage as to support geopolitical concerns, and how you see that as where you see the direction foreign aid should take and the connection between your suggestions for the modification of intelligence gathering.
When I finish speaking, you will all have master's degree in international economics.
Good.
All right. Soros is a smart guy. I respect him very much. Let me start by saying that Jeffrey Sachs has written a good book called The End of Poverty. He's at Columbia University. He's an advisor to the United Nations, and he's really focused on the end of extreme poverty rather than all poverty. But Jeffrey Sachs has basically said that developmental economics are completely different from the economics that the International Monetary Fund and the World Trade Administration are following. I am a big believer in the concept of immoral capitalism. You have William Greider's book, The Soul of Capitalism, Creating a Path to a Moral Economy. You have John Perkins on, you and I have to talk later. You have John Perkins on Confessions of an Economic Hitman. The bottom line here is that the deck is stacked, not only against other countries outside the G8, but against the publics of those countries and our own country. The whole system is screwed up, just like the United States government is screwed up. And I don't have any easy answers for you other than this. I have two solutions in mind, neither one of which is being listened to by anyone in power who might conceivably implement them, so don't think I'm putting on airs. Number one is I believe we need to use WikiCalc and other forms of actually posting the budget, the real budget, not the false budget that the government presents. The government doesn't show you the real costs of Iraq. It doesn't show you the real costs of the amputees, the real costs of lifetime disability and so forth. We need to actually connect the budget to reality. That's number one. Because if you connect the budget to reality, you will find that we are basically creating slave workers rather than thinkers as a general proposition across the economy. This is lunacy in the information age. The other thought that I have is that we need to take away the unaccountability of corporations, and we need to restore the concept of managers being accountable for their decisions and their actions. Right now, we have too many lawyers in America. We have too many veils that hide people. And the last thing that I'll say on this is that I absolutely believe that C.K. Prahalad should get a Nobel Peace Prize for his book on the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. He talks about how capitalism today is focused on the top billion who have a net disposable income of $1 trillion a year. And these are the people, I mean, I'm really pissed off at my kids' grandparents. We have 9 TVs in our house. There's something seriously wrong with that. But this is an economy that is built for people who can afford to have disposable refrigerators. Well, C.K. Prahalad has pointed out that the 5 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid have a $4 trillion a year net disposable income, but they buy different things. Their refrigerator in Africa costs $2, and it consists of a ceramic pot inside of another ceramic pot with an air filter buried with an air gap buried in the ground, which will keep meat fresh for 5 days. It's a completely different approach. I earnestly believe that we are within 3 to 7 years, just as a wild-ass guess, we're within 3 to 7 years of starting to get it and of starting to show through selective purchasing or non-purchasing and through vocal demand connected by the internet and so forth. What it boils down to is the world is an aquarium. And I'm reminded of that story where you put, you drop one rat into the aquarium and then eventually they start eating each other. 9/11 was the cesspool reaching our nose. And so we're going to have to take all this seriously. I'm sorry if that doesn't answer your question. Follow up?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Next, sir.
I had a couple of things.
Make love to the microphone.
Okay. I had a couple of things. One was I've read articles recently about a growing trend of basically people at home or just small local organizations of people who go online and browse Arabic language web forums and just take that information and submit it to the CIA or to the FBI and there have been arrests based on information supplied by these people. What is your opinion on this trend?
Well, first off, I think that those success stories are largely self-promotion by SETI, the woman who wrote Terrorist Hunter under the name Anonymous. She was trained by Steve Emerson. The reality is that neither the FBI nor the CIA are equipped to act on citizen inputs. And 9 out of 10 times, any kind of lead from any citizen is going to be discarded, just like they threw out 2 walk-ins. The system is not built to be networked. The system is built to be a bunker that takes in secrets and puts out very directed stovepipes. The system is not built to be comprehensive. For example, this so-called concept of intelligence sharing with the states. The Department of Homeland Security and CIA National Intelligence Implementation, and you can't blame CIA. I mean, they're less than 2 billion, 3 billion out of the 60 billion, okay? They're the runt in this whole thing. Rumsfeld is sitting on 85% of the intelligence budget. But for states to get intelligence, what's happening is they're building a cement bunker, they're running all these steel pipes in, and they're saying, okay, fine, 5 or 6 people can be cleared to read our precious gems, but they have to come from wherever they are to this cement bunker. They have to sign in, they have to read it, they can't make a copy, they can't make notes, they have to sign out. That's how we're going to share intelligence. That's just moronic. Okay? So let me segue that, because you raise an important point. The whole concept of citizen intelligence, and I address this in my second book, The New Craft of Intelligence, and the subtitle of my second book was Public, Personal, and Political. And lest you think I'm trying to sell my books, if you really want a PDF copy of my books, they're on my website for free. But I recommend you buy them from Amazon because they're much more fun. I mean, they're nice to touch and feel and mark up and everything. I don't make money on these. I publish them myself and give away half of them. The concept of citizen intelligence is very, very important, because what I see out in the world, what I learned on the Office of Information Technology at CIA when I was on a rotational tour, is that it's the data entry problem that breaks governments. And you solve that problem by creating a network where end users generate the content, post the content, structure the content, tag the content, and then the content can be shared. And the CIA is not there. They are, as John Perry Barlow wrote in Forbes long ago, they are the last vestige of the Soviet Gulag, okay, with respect to desks and computers and phones and so forth. They're in the Stone Age. So where I think I want to go with this is creating a public intelligence network that gets to the point where I was with the Aspen Brown Commission, which is within 6 phone calls I waxed the intelligence community's ass. And they try and ignore that. In fact, I keep saying we should drink to Wikipedia. I just tried to fix the Wikipedia open source intelligence, and I had these CIA morons. They wanted to pretend that the history of open source intelligence started on the 5th of December with the appointment of Sergeant Elliot Jardines as the Assistant Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Open Source. And I went in there and I put in the history from 1988 forward, and CIA comes in and deletes it. Okay, hello. So I said, fuck this, and created a table of contents for my website, because I realized nobody was digging into my website. So now I've created a Dummy's Guide to Open Source Intelligence. I hope you guys all get drunk on this speech. You know, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Citizen intelligence is very important, and I love my concept of a 119 number and a 114 number. With the 119 number going to every cell phone within a 1 mile radius of whatever you see that's a threat. The 114 number goes to a community intelligence center, and if 3 to 5 people are sending in the same information about a guy taking pictures of a nuclear plant, as my 17-year-old would say, that's a clue. Has anyone identified my son yet? Yes. All right, where is he? Back here. Can I say his name? Yes. Patrick. It is? All right, I promised him that if he was identified, I wouldn't ask him to say anything, and I wouldn't say anything about him. Are you out there? He's not there anymore. I can describe him for you. All right. Brown, curly hair, about your build. Uh-huh. And tell me about his body jewelry. I think he's got a piercing on his eyebrow or something like that. You got it. Now, what should the prize be? How about you give me your address and I'll send you whichever one of my books you want. All right. He's been. I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of you guys. I mean, in many ways, I feel that over the years I've earned the opportunity to bring my son here, and I think that he's found a kindred spirit among you, although he's been very shy about talking to people. And I think that's a good thing. Another question, sir.
Yes. You mentioned earlier the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, but I'm curious on what you think of the actual accuracy of the story that book presents.
That's a good question. I don't think the guy worked for NSA. NSA doesn't do that kind of stuff. I think there are... Is that my son back there? Are you willing to come up here and just... I promise I won't say a word. But I think that, in fact, I'd like someone to take a picture of the two of us up here. Can you just point and push the middle button? All right. Who would have thought? Good. All right. Take that. Thank you. I have one normal child, my third. Yes, sir. Oh, that's beautiful. Send it to me. Do you have my card? Okay. Patrick is the first, and he has my brains and his mother's common sense. My second son is a geek with very long hair who never comes out of his room and is getting very skilled at Warlock or whatever it's called.
World of Warcraft.
And my third son is a wide receiver who is going to be, I bought a 1964 MGB, my second one, and I've promised it to him when he goes to college in 9 years, but he won't need that to be a babe magnet. He's a walking stud at the age of 10. So anyway, good kids with a great mother. Question.
It was about confession.
Oh, Perkins. I think Perkins is no more than 20% fiction. And I think that the 80% that is substance is very real. For example, I am very impressed by the stories he tells about corporations using quasi or pseudo-religious organizations to basically infect native populations with diarrhea and get them to move off mountains that have a lot of gold and things like that. I'm not given to conspiracy theories. I am given to where there's smoke, there's fire. And I have reviewed Perkins' book on Amazon, and I would give it easily an 80% credibility rating. But no, NSA does not hire people like that to go do things.
Just one more thing. You mentioned Operation Northwoods and
Operation what?
Northwind.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something about the plan, including killing American citizens.
Jim Bamford has the complete copy of that declassified plan in the back of his book, Pretext for War.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, as far as I've seen so far, it included basically preserving the lives of all involved, and no lives were supposed to be killed.
Really? I don't think that's fine if that's what you think, and if that's the way it is. But I don't think that's the way it was actually intended. Yeah. It was intended to kill enough people in a gruesome enough way as to arouse the American passion and allow America to go to war.
What is your opinion on loose change?
Of who?
Loose change.
Don't know it.
The documentary?
Haven't seen it.
Okay.
I mean, I can't see everything. I'll keep an eye out for it. Yes, sir.
It's not worth it.
Okay.
Moving off the topic of our government and everything for a moment, what do you think, or what are your opinions on many of the governments in the Middle East and how they're investing their money? I'm thinking mostly of the oil-producing countries,
right,
and a lot of the princes, not producing it, putting it back into the people.
Two quick answers. One, all of those governments are run by elites that are screwing their people. The Saudi Arabian government in particular. The Saudi Arabian government, and Robert Baer is a friend of mine. He's written a couple of really good books, See No Evil, and I forget what the other one is. The Saudi Arabian government is a bunch of sex-crazed, there aren't words to describe them. To include kidnapping blondes, by the way. I've put her name in. No, I'm not. I wouldn't do that to anyone. I'm sorry I can't be here for hacking bitches. No. Sorry, that was so cruel. There's actually a kidnapping ring that will deliver movie starlets by name. And people stupid enough to go to a so-called movie audition by themselves are very primed to be kidnapped. When the UN is talking about other atrocities, they're talking about trade in women and children, including perversions with children, and they're talking about kidnapping for body parts and kidnapping for specified sex. I think all of these governments are completely corrupt. I would refer you to a book by Ambassador Palmer called The Real Axis of Evil. If I were God, or if I were advising a president, I would have an Undersecretary of State for Democracy with 2 assistant secretaries. One for the guys that agree to a 5-year buyout, 44 dictators, and one for the ones who don't. And I would have an Undersecretary of Defense for peace. What a concept. Now, theoretically, Defense Directive 3000 makes peace equally important as war, but we know that's not true because you don't profit from peace. At least the war profiteers don't. The second comment I would make to you is that for all of Israel's faults, I still condemn the Arab nations for failing to provide Palestinians with land, passports, rights, and support. They simply haven't done it.
I guess where I'm trying to go with this, or my thoughts on it, are what do you think some of the effects will be?
What do I think what?
Some of the effects will be. I mean...
If what? They got their shit together?
No, if they run out of their profits. We're running into crisis with oil and all the natural resources and all that shit.
Well,
and where do you think that will go?
Number one, we're running out of oil because 30 years ago we decided not to give a shit at the policy level. There are lots of solutions for oil, but one of them is not tar sands. Canada right now is doing something really stupid. They are pumping water they don't have to get oil out of sands. Okay, so they're doing a water-oil trade-off, which is really stupid. I don't want to be sanguine about this, and I agree with Henry Kissinger when he says Africa is a litmus test for American foreign policy. I believe that nature has a way of curing many ills. There are 59 plagues around the world. One of them is going to hit the Arabs at some point. If I were God, I would say we're going to be free of Arabic oil, and we're going to make nice with Hugo Chavez. Chavez is building a pipeline from Venezuela to Cartagena, which is a refinery town. I lived there. My dad was an oil engineer. And that pumps crude oil, and then he's going to pump refined oil to the west coast of Cartagena, completely bypass the Panama Canal, and China is basically going to suck Venezuela dry at the same time that it populates Latin America. Okay, the world is turning Chinese. Russia is going to be Chinese within 20 to 40 years. They're just spreading. Okay, we have no strategy for this. We have absolutely no strategy. I think it all comes down to getting a grip on reality. The United States has to understand the real world in all of these languages with historical depth, with cultural sophistication. Bring it on. Holy shit. That boy is, I think George Bush has issues with his sexuality. And I think he is belligerent and a bully in part because he's not all man. You heard it here first, or maybe you didn't hear it first. Okay? And we elected the asshole. Okay. Well, all right. You're absolutely right. We did not elect him. We let him steal the election. You're absolutely correct. Okay. And I will never forgive Al Gore for not having the balls to listen to Greg Pabst, who told him before it all came to pass what was going to happen. Greg Pabst broke this story before Election Day, and Gore just didn't want to listen.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's the best I can do. Yes, sir.
I had heard reports from Iraq that the IEDs were set off by cell phones.
That's correct.
Do I have a confirmation on that?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
In fact, on my website, there's a report that we did on IEDs and cell phone detonation. One of the interesting things is the Chinese are producing millions and millions of what are called long-range base station cell phones. So, for example, a guy who has a 40-acre or 400-acre ranch can set up a base station tied to a landline and then have all kinds of cell phones. There are also now cell phones in mini airplanes, drones.
Why don't they program the cell phone towers or the cell phone systems to just randomly ring all the phones in some random pattern to totally discourage this activity?
We actually did this in Beirut long ago. The Marine Corps had a special team that would go through and would basically set off bombs while they were being made. And it was lots of fun. I think your idea is a good one. One of the problems that we're encountering is that, and the Pakistanis are the very best at this, what they do is they jam or shut off all cell phone coverage along the route of President Musharraf. Who knows who's doing this and why? You know, it's certainly a great idea. I don't know if we're doing it or not. We haven't figured out how to do insurgency. I mean, you don't do insurgency in convoys with bulletproof vests and sunglasses. You do it with water trucks and medicine and food and working electricity. And the fact that electricity doesn't work in Beirut today tells me that George Bush doesn't give a shit about stabilizing Iraq. Okay?
Question for you is, where do you feel the UN is in this situation on global politics, and where should they be?
The UN is as close as we get to an effective international organization. It has some pathological deficiencies. The first pathological deficiency is it doesn't have a clue on how to do decision support. And Louise Frechette, the Canadian Deputy Minister of Defense who became the Deputy Secretary General, that was one of her priorities. She still hasn't solved it. The Brahimi report was a very important report on decision support and making the UN effective. Major General Kamir, my friend, I'm going to spend a couple of weeks in the Congo in the G2 tent to see what the UN has at the bottom of the tent after the elections in September. He did his best to move intelligence forward, but right now, thank you, right now the UN lacks intelligence in all senses of the word. The UN has two other major flaws. The first major flaw is that its people have become accustomed to a life of luxury at the headquarters level, and they have become accustomed to using students who like to party as volunteers in the field, as well as detailees from Nigeria who don't read or drive a truck or whatever. Ambassador Oakley has done a good book on the, policing the New World Disorder or something like that, and he talks about these issues. The third problem that we have is that the United Nations is like Wikipedia's. The majority of morons rule, except for the Security Council, which has inappropriate veto power. So I think there's some things that need to be changed there, but I would be the first to say, God help me, John Bolton might be the enema they need. And two, I think the UN is all we've got and we need to make it work. Okay?
Thank you.
Hi, I was wondering, I hear a lot about Al-Qaeda, but I was wondering if you could talk a little about...
No, just, you don't have to move it, just touch it.
I was wondering if you could talk a little about the white power militias in this country.
Oh, yes.
I heard something on Democracy Now!
Yes.
When they were searching for weapons of mass destruction, and I didn't hear it on any other news source, but that they did find them. And
well,
if
American enlisted men will sell anything to anyone, which is why we're hemorrhaging M16s out of National Guard armories and stuff like that. The neo-Nazis in America have discovered, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so there are, I think, some very destructive tendencies of the Islamic radicalists to use white neo-Nazis as cover and so forth. And they're forming some alliances. I don't have a lot of direct information on this, but I have heard an extremely good lecture by Tom Copeland. You might try and Google, it may even be on my website. But Tom Copeland from LexisNexis has done an excellent lecture on ties between white extremists in the United States and enemies of the United States of Arabic or Islamic origin. The second thing I will tell you two other things. One, the Oklahoma City bombing was a much larger network of co-conspirators than the U.S. government wants you to know, my opinion. And two, I gave like 19 speeches across the country in the aftermath of that for the American Foreign Relations Committee, AFCR or something. And I was stunned to find that there are an awful lot of Americans that really hate our government. And these are reasonable, middle class, medical, loyal. I mean, I don't talk to anybody above, you know, middle class or below middle class. And these are people that are very reasonable and sane. And they think the federal government is a really big part of the problem. And I think libertarians are gaining ground west of the Mississippi. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that Joel Garrow, whose wonderful book, 9 Nations in North America, set the stage for us fragmenting into 9 nations. But I do believe that there is a tendency in the world to go back toward fragmentation along logical regional lines. And I agree with Ralph Peters. We need to reconstruct Africa and Arabia along ethnic and tribal lines rather than colonial lines that were arbitrarily set.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir, of course. I have nothing to do between now and 10 in the morning. Actually, between now and 8 in the morning.
I was wondering if you support Dennis Kucinich's proposition to establish a Department for Peace.
The short answer is yes, but that is a cop-out. What he really needs to do is make the Department of State and the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice and the rest of the government work as they're supposed to. Right now, in Iraq, the only people doing their job are the troops that are dying and bleeding every day. The rest of the U.S. government is out to lunch.
Thanks.
What's your viewpoint on Fox News?
I actually tune into Fox News. I was banned from Fox News after I said we're not fighting a global war on terror. That's just a pretext. They didn't like that. Fox News and this Ann Coulter. Actually, there's one book I reviewed called Strategery. And I'll tell you what, the idiocy of the ideological right has to be seen and felt to be believed. I mean, these people are nuts. And I'm just absolutely stunned. I mean, there's a major coalition between the Jews and the evangelical Christians. They've actually got a multi-million-dollar program to grow the perfect red calf, which is like the signal that shit's going to happen. And I'm absolutely convinced there's a branch in the Mossad. They've done this twice now. And at the very last minute, a little white hair has appeared. And I'm absolutely convinced there's a Mossad branch that is responsible for taking chlorine to one hair on this calf right before it gets to where we need to be. These people are lunatics. And they're in power.
You mentioned the importance of citizen intelligence, and I wonder if at one point you become concerned on creating an Orwellian world in which half the citizenry is somehow informing on another half.
One of the problems we ran into in the Phoenix program in Vietnam is that people were reporting on people in order to kill people they owed money to. Thank you very much. I like the Google attitude, which is that the answer to dangerous information is more information. One of the reasons I believe that we need to evaluate information from the bottom up is that the FBI has no clue whether Aunt Matilda is a credible story or whatever, Joe Bob, whatever. But I think at the neighborhood level, you end up knowing each other. And I think that citizen intelligence is really, I mean, it's like Jamestown. He who does not work does not eat. He who does not think, fuck off. So we need to get to this point where we're all a vibrant hive. And that includes, by the way, swarming threats to the hive. I mean, this whole air transportation thing is bullshit. We get it. Okay? Next asshole that pulls out a box cutter is dead. Okay? It ain't going to happen. So how about the New York ferry, 7,000 at rush hour? That's next. You got to keep an eye, but I think this cell phone thing, 119, 114, I think that's part of the solution. And I think you also, it's like karma points, eventually you learn who the lunatics are and you start toning them down. I believe in citizen intelligence. I believe in morality. I believe that inherently people are good if they know they're being watched. So it's better than what we've got now. 50% of the dots that will prevent the next 9/11 are going to come from bottom up, from cops and citizens on the street. The problem right now is that when they call the FBI takes their number and throws it in the bin. Okay? The FBI could care less what citizens are thinking. My second book is online for free. Also my briefs, by the way. I mean, I have a whole bunch of briefs on the new craft of intelligence, new rules for the new craft of intelligence. They're all on my website for free. Yes, sir.
Yes. During your talk, I noticed that you mentioned the term Wahhabism, the extremist Wahhabis. Looks like you understand the difference between Shiites, Sunnis, and Wahhabis. But the problem is, I noticed that the American people don't understand these differences. And the media is also portraying Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah as people of the same school, while they are in fact opponents, or Hezbollah is actually leaning towards Hamas rather than Al-Qaeda. Why is that created in the media? And why are who benefits from deceiving people into thinking that they are actually the same?
One of the problems that we've discovered is that, and this is well documented in a book called The Price of Loyalty and the 1% Doctrine and so forth, Dick Cheney shut out the bureaucracy. The State Department knows the difference between Shiites and Sunnis, and they know that there's one in the majority that's close to Iran. This information, perhaps because Dick Cheney did not wish it to move, this information did not get to George Bush. He is documented as having ordered the war in Iraq, not realizing that he was doing Iran a favor. And as far as terrorism goes, never underestimate the simplicity of the U.S. government. In fact, CIA has closed the bin Laden shop. They've given up. That just boggles the mind. I think bin Laden is an honored guest of the Pakistani government, as is the nuclear scientist. So what it boils down to is that you get the government you deserve. You can't have a smart government when you have a dumb nation, and right now we have a really dumb nation.
One more question. Where do you see the American government moving towards the Saudi textbooks? I'm actually Saudi, and I have studied these religious textbooks, and I'm a Shiite. I belong to the minority Shiites in Saudi Arabia. And I remember one of the things that the minorities suffer is that when we take tests, we have to answer questions that put us in hell. I mean, when they ask you a question, where do the Shiites belong in the afterlife, we have to write, we go to hell.
You don't get the virgins?
I'm sorry?
You don't get the virgins?
No, unfortunately not.
By the way, I'm curious. I'm told that one translation of the 79 versions is actually 79 dates. Now, is it dates or virgins?
I have no idea about that.
What is it? Raisins? So it's raisins, not virgins.
I think they're virgins.
Okay. Virgin grapes or white grapes? Yeah, I've heard the white grapes version. Which is it?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Is it virgins or white grapes that you get if you're a martyr?
I don't know. I'm not sure really.
Okay.
I can't answer that.
No sweat.
Yeah, but where do you see the government going towards these textbooks which are giving birth to more terrorists every day?
The U.S. government is stupid, okay? In Iraq, for example, we're dealing right now with the fact, and I'm going to have to go to the bathroom soon. In Iraq, we're dealing with the fact, this is more information than you need, but I have a small gluttonous throat that needs to be constantly lubricated. In Iraq, we have written tribal histories that have not been digitized. In Iraq, the biggest source of tension between the Sunnis and the Shiites at the neighborhood level is over property ownership. But when you open a property book, it's like the Dead Sea Scrolls. It actually fragments. And so the U.S. government isn't paying attention. They don't care. You're absolutely right. The U.S. government is so out of it. I mean, Paul Bremer will go down as history as one of the most destructive people on the planet. And also, maybe this is his intent, and I'm going to stop with this, and I'll come back if you want me to, or I can go into a smaller session. But Paul Bremer hasn't accounted for $18 out of $20 billion that he was given in cash. You know. All right, I'll be right back. All right, this is, someone's given me notes. I know everything. I don't, but I have an opinion on everything. And then takeaways. Buy my books on Amazon. Government sucks. Everyone equals stupid. Circumlocute all questions. Wikis will not fucking solve everything. They're controlled by morons. Speaker is short-sighted. Okay. Every government and I mean, there's no one else on the planet that has spent 18 years fighting for open source intelligence. Americans will change. Yes? Americans, what we're going to do, this is the last split, and then if a few people want to have, 2 or 3 drinks, that'll be great, because I love to have 2 or 3 drinks before I go to bed, but that's it. This guy has an answer for everything. Do you guys think I have an answer for everything? Huh? Oh, fuck. Was this my son? He's walking home. I love him. You can't, I can't, what? Are you kidding me? He discovered his own mind at the age of 12, and I've been helpless ever since. Yes, sir.
What you said is, much of what you're saying is tragically true. There's no doubt any seasoned observer here in New York viewing what is going on, I am forced to agree with certainly over 90% of what you're saying. But a major reason why things have gotten to the extent that they are now is because of the ineffective and
Can you turn that down? You're being disruptive. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Okay, has been the ineffective and really erratic behavior of people that normally would be. Guy, come on. Huh?
Hey, by the way, somewhere in this building, 2 people are having sex under a table, and I wish I were there. But this is what has the security guys in a tizzy. Go on. I'm not smiling.
A little side entertainment there. All right. What I'm saying is that most of the activist organizations here have begun to behave in such an ineffective and erratic way, and it's very, very difficult to believe that this is by chance. For example, I've lived in New York all my life. There have been protests on foreign policy all my life. Why is that there is never a protest at 68th Street and Park Avenue, or outside the Trilateral Commission, or near the American Friends of the Bilderberg, or near the Lucis Trust? I mean, you see, everybody here is treating symptomology. Nobody's treating cause. Nobody is addressing the NGOs and the central organizations that are generating these policies. It isn't the State Department. The policy is basically made in New York City. It goes down to Foggy Bottom, it's stamped, and then, it's American policy. But it isn't American policy. It's these characters on the Upper East Side.
I agree with that.
And look, unless people really get outside those buildings and yell bloody murder, things are going to continue to deteriorate. You cannot have, you cannot have organizations. You saw what happened at the 2000 Millennium Meeting at the United Nations. Nobody showed up to talk on virtually anything. There were busloads of people that came to town. They were brought into an auditorium. Then they were told to get back on the buses and leave. The World Economic Forum, 300 people showed up. Remember how many people were supposed to show up? Surprise, only 300 people showed up. How does that happen? The entire protest industry, or the entire activist community, has sunk to a level of such erraticism and such ineffectiveness that of course these people feel that they can come out and do whatever they want because there's no effective public response. Why are there no protests outside of 68th Street and Park Avenue ever?
Okay, got it. Couple of comments. One, I think that Lori Wallach is onto something. Two, I will refer you to a book by Bill Moyer called Doing Democracy, in which he talks about the 8 stages. And most interesting to me, because this was meaningful to me at a point in my life where I thought I had failed, stage number 5 is where you think you failed. And it's kind of a period of quiet. But in fact, things are starting to gel and others are starting to spontaneously move in that direction. What I think has changed in the last couple of years is the ability to share information and mobilize people using handheld devices and lists and digests and so forth. I mean, in Kuwait, the women are organizing spontaneous demonstrations by cell phone. So I understand and agree with all that you've said. In fact, I would say that there is, in fact, an American banking group. There are a couple of angles on this. One is that I think that the Rothschilds were able to transport to the United States of America their concept of managing the country as if we're all serfs. We're all peasants, okay? And we just exist to kind of feed the system. I think that's there. I also think that you've got some extraordinarily unethical people on Wall Street. I refer you to Mark Lewis's Liar's Poker, where he talks about exploding the clients, okay? Wall Street will play the game for themselves in the early days, and then they'll sell out and they'll let you take the loss. Finally, Bill Clinton certainly discovered that Wall Street was calling the shots on his economy, and today we have the chairman of Goldman Sachs as Secretary of Treasury. This is not good news. You're absolutely right. Things are in a very, very dire state of affairs. But I have to feel that sometime in the next 7 years we're going to see a major turning point. All of my reading, and I haven't read everything, I've only read about 3,000 books in 10 years, all of my reading suggests that we're about to move from a top-down, unilateral, secretive decision-making system to a bottom-up, multicultural, open source intelligence. Drink! Okay, open source intelligence system. I believe this passionately. So can't do better than that. You're right on the problems, but I think you may be too pessimistic, and maybe I'm wrong, but it gives me hope. Yes, sir.
Okay, and now for something completely different. I have 2 legs, but on
2 what?
Legs.
You have 2 legs.
Spam, Monty Python.
What don't I understand? Oh.
But in all honesty, as we go on, or for something completely different, actually one of the items that is pretty much a cornerstone behind your open source intelligence is pretty much news media. And pretty much using that to get an idea as far as what's going on.
That's the shallowest part of it, but go on.
Oh, sorry. But the question actually comes towards maybe not so much from the mainstream media perspective, as I'm aware that there are some grassroots organizations along lines of like Indie Media, or where they actually go and actually investigate the real news. But as far as, or one perspective thereof. But when it comes to mainstream, I mean, I know there have been a couple of episodes in the Times where, at least recently with the wiretapping issue, where it kind of spawned such a backlash as far as the First Amendment rights issue goes that we've got members within the Congress and even up in our executive and legislative branches to the point where they actually want to restrict that kind of freedom even more so and actually censure the Times and also other forms of the free press. And I was kind of curious as far as your views or insights on such censorships or...
Okay. Well, let's take that from the field back. John Fialka from the Wall Street Journal wrote a wonderful book called Hotel Warriors. And Robert Young Pelton, who does the book World's Most Dangerous Places and a Discovery show, Come Back Alive, it's well documented that not only the media but the embassies are essentially relying on third and fourth hand information. They haven't actually put their boots in the ground and their eyes on the target. So take that outside of a few exceptional journalists like Robert Kaplan, Cy Hirsch, and so forth. Second, we don't have a free media. In the run-up to the war in Iraq, there were a number of organizations and individuals ready to pay $100,000 in cash for full-page ads in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and so forth, with very correct information against the war. And these corporately owned newspapers rejected those ads. And when I spoke with Alvin Toffler, and I mentioned him the other day, but when I spoke with Toffler, I asked, what's our biggest problem? He says, our biggest problem is the collapse of all of our institutions. And he specifically mentioned the New York Times is no longer being reliable. And I agree with that. And the Bush posturing against the New York Times, I think that's as much show as anything else. Because he had Judith Miller in the New York Times. And Judith Miller was a direct asset shared by Israel and the Americans and the B'nai B'rith. And she did a lot of damage. And the Times guys knew it. They tried to kind of block her in and stuff. Now, I see all these problems, but I also see hope. I mean, Trippi has written his book. There's several books that I've reviewed on the new media. I think we were all agreed that blogging is passé now. It's no longer cool. What is cool is starting to set up distributed networks that can create structured answers to questions that are authoritative. Now, let me address open source. The media is the shallowest level of open source. That's where FBIS, that's where the Foreign Broadcast Information Service stops. Okay? Below the media, you have books, which FBIS doesn't read. The United States of America killed the Joint Publications Research Service, which used to find and translate important books in all languages for the Library of Congress and for the general distribution. We don't do that anymore. We don't read books in the intelligence community. Dissertations. Most knowledge starts as a dissertation. We don't do foreign dissertations. We don't even do American dissertations. Okay? And finally, you have what I call experts and observers. I was stunned 5 years ago to learn that the vice chairman of the National Intelligence Council didn't know what citation analysis is. Okay, there's the Social Science Citation Index and the Science Citation Index created by Eugene Garfield, an American hero, in the Institute of Scientific Information. And I can identify, for $1,000, I can identify the top 100 people in the world based on publications on anything. And through them, I can identify the top 100 people who are unpublished in the NGOs, governments, and so forth. CIA doesn't do citation analysis. Now, this is amazing, in part because they're not allowed to talk to people who don't have clearances, okay, which is stupid. So experts, and particularly foreign experts, are absolutely vital. And finally, you have observers. We monitor sermons around the world. And we do it in many different ways, but mostly indirectly, because now the sermons are getting smart and they've got detectors to find tape recorders, and so it's getting harder to get actual tape recordings of the sermons. But sermons, student papers, lectures by teachers, Chamber of Commerce meetings where local problems are discussed, none of this is coming into the United States system. None of it. All right? We are at a very superficial level, and nothing pisses me off more than CNN in my elevator. You know, I want you to point out, I don't think my son actually drew this. He's a much better artist, but my brains are coming out of my ass here. Thank you, whoever shared this with me. So, another question?
For how much we've been bashing the mental capacity of conservatives so far, I feel like it's something we should give them respect for, is their ability to rally both their own supporters and the swing vote. I mean, they put billions of dollars each year into think tanks and into getting people into the proper position such they can continue to control the political landscape. Progressives, meanwhile, I think they don't have any sort of infrastructure like that and waste most of their money on ineffectual NGOs, that kind of
George
thing.
Soros wasted his money.
Yeah.
I mean, Soros wasn't even close to putting his money wisely into American politics.
So I suppose what I'm asking is, would you blame the ineffectual elections in this country and just the generally dismal landscape of politics, would you blame that on the population being stupid, or would you blame that on basically having one-party politics where the Democrats can't get their shit together?
Well, I don't have all the answers. I'll speculate a little bit. First off, there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans other than that the Democrats are more inept. They're both corrupt. I mean, one reason I certainly don't want to impeach George Bush is because Nancy Pelosi in the White House gives me nightmares. I sat next to her on an airplane once for 6 hours. There wasn't a thought that came out of her head. I think that there's a problem, actually, with what is maybe called third generation rich or whatever. We're coming off some good times, and in those good times, we lost sight of citizenship. We lost sight of engagement. We lost sight of caring. It's become a cheating, selfish culture, by and large, present company accepted. Citizens abdicated their role. Now, I don't know, I presume all of you know that the League of Women Voters was thrown out of the debate business specifically to shut out third, fourth, and fifth party candidates. And although we had a remarkable slate a few years ago, one of the first things we have to do is get back to multi-party debates. In fact, I want to take it one level lower. I think we absolutely have to force the presidents to pick their cabinet in advance of the election. America is too complex to be run by a white boy and his friends. Okay? We have to have cabinet-level debates, at least defense, state, and justice. So my bottom line is we've lost it. You know, we've had it good. We've had it good enough so we didn't care how much they were stealing in Wall Street because we had our cheap gas and cheap beer and all this stuff. Someone else can have this. I don't drink beer. It bloats me. So I don't have any answers other than I think we are going to see a couple of disasters that will be shocking to us. And I also believe, like the New York blackouts and like combat, people come together under stress. And under stress, the elites are not going to help us. We're going to help ourselves. And that's as good as I can do. What? Yeah, Katrina was a disaster. That was really horrible, and it's unfortunate that most of the people left behind were black, and that those are the most corrupt cops on the planet. Yeah, I like Pelton. And in fact, these cops, I mean, there are a number of books in the literature that suggest that Brown and Root is a CIA subsidiary that is also running drugs into America through all of the construction equipment that's coming back, and also through the oil rigs off the coast of New Orleans. All right, another question.
In reference to power through economic control. And
let's make this. Is there someone behind you? All right, these are the last two questions.
All right. I'll try to make this quick since people can't make.
No, that's fine. I'm not worried about time. But let's just stop for the group with these last two questions, and then if anyone else has private questions, I'll speak for.
Anyway, this gentleman had mentioned the Bilderbergs. Now, there's obviously a proven link between economics and power, and he controls the money, controls the politics and whatnot. How do you see groups like the Bilderbergs and whatnot? How do you see them even supporting something like open source intelligence, OSI?
They're scared to death of it.
Well, yeah, to try to empower the people from the bottom up. I mean, look, they're going to try to stop you and throw as much money as they can at it.
Well, I think I'm too small to be noticed yet, but one of the things that's interesting is they only have power because we let them have power. If you look at the pension funds and the unions and the opportunities for popular power, these guys are living on our backs because we let them live on our backs. If you stop buying all this shit that they're selling, and if you take your money out of stocks and put it into gold, and if you basically stop playing their game, that's one answer. The other answer is I think that there will be a come to Jesus meeting in 10 to 15 years where a lot of the stuff that has been stolen from us will be retrievable. I see no reason why we can't take back all of Bill Gates' fortune except for $1 billion. I think... Huh? He's not donating it. He's helping a few syphilitic Indian guys who are queer for each other use condoms. Okay? I am not impressed. Syphilitic guys is a drink term now? All right, last question.
In terms of journalistic quality, what are your thoughts on National Public Radio? And if you had the chance, given your open source intelligent budget that you would like to have, would you throw more funding their way?
I will tell you that I used to have a great deal of respect for National Public Radio until I found out that it worked for Otto Reich. They are actively censored by the U.S. government. I used to be a regular guest on NPR until one day I pointed out that more Palestinians were getting killed than Jews. I was instantly banned from NPR. I will support NPR provided that it moves under the Broadcasting Board of Governors, and the Broadcasting Board of Governors, which is outgoing public diplomacy, and the Open Source Agency, which is incoming information or reality, are both completely independent of the executive in every way, shape, and form. All right. God bless you all. If someone wants to buy me 3 vodkas, I'll talk and drink for another half hour, and then I'm going to bed. Pork combined with incompetence. Okay? This is a no bullshit statement. This is well documented in the literature. Your policymakers don't know shit about the real world. They know about winning votes in their local constituencies where pinheads elect pinheads. That's what we have to change. Are we having fun yet? All right. Part of the problem, and I love you guys because, you know, you energize me. You really do. I feel blessed that I somehow got hooked up with this. I can't even remember. Maybe Wynne Schwartau recommended me to Emmanuel. Senator Bourne, David something or other, Bergen maybe, have both talked about the need to internationalize U.S. education. Now, we all know, and I absolutely love that anarchist poster, Schools as Prisons, which is why I've brought my son here to set him free. But the fact of the matter is, U.S. schools suck. All right? They were created to build factory workers. And that's one of the things we've got to change. So my vision for national intelligence is I'm going to take the $60 billion. I'm going to cut the spies to $20 billion. I'm going to put the other $40 billion in education, including online, distance learning, and so forth. Believe it or not, U.S. intelligence doesn't impact on what we buy. When I stood up the Marine Corps Intelligence Command, I looked at the real world. And, oh, by the way, we buy airplanes for a warm day that is not humid. The real world is hot and humid. This means that our airplanes built by very expensive airplanes have half the lift, half the loiter, and half the range as advertised. All right? We're not building airplanes to a real world. And, oh, by the way, there's a reason why European companies don't sell trucks to the third world that weigh more than 30 tons. So why do we have a 97-ton artillery system? Okay, or a 45-ton M1A1, which invented the concept of gallons per mile? Okay? The U.S. government is stupid. It really is literally stupid. I'm not saying the people are stupid. I'm saying the system is stupid. We haven't impacted on the private sector. Microsoft should never have been a lawsuit. Microsoft should have been a fucking standard that say you have open APIs or we'll kill you. We build these extremely complex systems that have absolutely no provision for how are they going to get smart. The United States government cannot find, fix, and follow an individual, or even a unit. All right? We're a static system. We're built to follow Soviet Union systems that start out in gestation and then build up over 20 years and then are field tested and then finally are put in the field. We're not ready for off-the-shelf warfare. We can't do wide area surveillance. There's a simple reason for this. Back in the 70s, we didn't have the money, and so we had a choice between precision surveillance and wide area surveillance, and we went with precision surveillance to find Soviet missile silos. And that's great. But have you ever tried to do a wide area map where you're using postage stamps at different times of day, different angles of look, different seasons? It doesn't fucking work. Okay, we can't do the last mile. The United States government cannot see under jungle canopy. It cannot see into caves, but we like to use B-2 bombers to bomb caves, okay? B-2 bombers flying to the United States to bomb 18 assholes in a cave? This is a really expensive solution. We can't do real-time change detection. We have one really big fucking expensive national intelligence tribe, and we have completely pissed on all the other intelligence tribes. So, military, law enforcement, business, journalists, non-governmental organizations, religions, labor unions, citizen advocacy groups. The United States shuts all of those out of the equation. We chose to go with secrecy instead of sharing. Now that's changing. And I give the CIO for the DNI a lot of credit. He's the only asshole up there that knows what he's doing. Secrets are primarily valuable in the context of a rich, open-source knowledge foundation. You can't have smart spies in the context of a dumb nation. We have a nation that can't find the fucking next state. Okay? Much less another country. Americans, I'm sorry to say, in Latin America they call us tontos utiles, useful idiots. That's what we are. Okay? Present company accepted. Spies only know secrets. Think about that. Spies only know secrets. Spies only know 10 to 15% of reality. They only know what they've stolen. They don't know history. They don't know context. They don't know culture. They don't know political, legal, socioeconomic, ideocultural, techno-demographic, natural geographic, my first thesis 2 decades ago. Spies don't know what the fuck is going on. Let me quote George Tenet, intelligence prostitute, first class. Okay? George Tenet speaking to all of the Allied intelligence chiefs said, and I quote, "We don't know shit." I'm not making this up. So, don't send a spy where a schoolboy can go. Duh, as my 17-year-old would say. Now, other than the 3 guys who are sworn to secrecy, has anybody identified my son yet? God, you're a bunch of losers. Come on. You can identify him. Let's look at the eyes. Make sense or add value. America has gone wrong in 2 big ways. The first way has been to equate intelligence to secrets. Intelligence is not about secrets. Intelligence is about making sense. It's about understanding. The other way we have gone wrong, and General Ike Eisenhower warned us about this, is by allowing the military, industrial, prison, hospital complex to basically buy the government. The U.S. government no longer represents the people of the United States. This is it. This is $60 billion spent on, and I'm being generous here, 20% of the value, because the 80-20 rule is one that kind of works. But the reality is that we're spending $60 billion on the 5 to 10% of the information we can steal on the 7 to 9 targets that Dick Cheney thinks will sell fear. Okay? We are spending less than $60 million, no, less than $600 million on the other 85%. Now, I will tell you, I was a ghostwriter for the Marine Corps, and General Gray published an article called Global Intelligence Challenges of the 1990s. He published this article in 1988. And he said, we need to focus on terrorism, we need to focus on revolution, we need to focus on instability, we need to focus on all these other things that are destabilizing the world. Oh, by the way, open source intelligence is 85% of that. Nobody wanted to hear it. Not even from me, not even from the Commandant of the Marine Corps. This is the slide I've shown you before. Oh, okay, is Blondie here? We know she's not a real blonde. I love her. I mean, you want to hear sexism? Hey, Blondie, let's go have a drink and work it out. Okay. Let me explain it, and I will explain it. That's a good point. What I have done with this chart is taken the 10 threats that the United Nations has identified, and I've gone back in time and looked at all these policy books, Mandate for Change, everything the Democrats and the Republicans write with their lobbying for positions in the next administration. And I'm going to have to change this because I'm about to talk to every committee chairman on the Senate, so I'm going to have to add agriculture, among other things. But basically, if you look at this, we're fucked on debt, security, and water, and energy, and ecology. And then you have these big dogs here. We don't have a strategy for how do we help the big dogs avoid our mistakes. For example, China is in the business right now of selling cars to Chinese. This is about as fucking stupid as you can get, okay, because there are a lot of them. And China has got 300 water-stressed cities. All right, there are a lot of issues here, and so we don't have this strategy, this holistic strategy that tries to help people come to grips with reality. Now, some of you may not have been at my other speech, but I love Trotsky's statement, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. Well, this administration may not be interested in reality, but I assure you reality is interested in us. Okay? So, that's the end of the slideshow. Any questions? And this is completely improv. I'd like to get to bed by 1, but I'll do whatever you want me to do. And yes, sir, over there in the microphone. My son is in the audience. And one of the things I really like about this year is that I have seen hackers carrying around babies, and I've seen parent hackers bringing teenager hackers. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This is the lifeboat. You guys energize me because the stuff I tell you that you cheer when I say this in Washington, they shit in their pants or they say, oh, fuck, who is this lunatic? But we're making progress. All right, now this year, because I've done this 3 times now, I've decided to give you a very fast brief, and here it is. If you Google, in Google News, for hackers and steal, you will get a press release that gives you tiny URLs to both of the briefs that I've given at this conference, except that the first brief I added 2 slides, and I'll update that tomorrow. Well, these are the elements of intelligence. Your government is fucking stupid. Okay? Brief history of intelligence, secret war, strategic analysis, smart nation. Smart nation is about collective intelligence. This isn't me. This is guys like Tom Atlee that has the Co-Intelligence Institute. This is guys like Howard Rheingold that's written about smart mobs. This is about whatever his name is. I can't pronounce it. It's like Polish on steroids. Wisdom of the crowds, Army of Davids. Okay, the internet has empowered the people. Right now there is a race between Dick Cheney and white-collar criminals on Wall Street and us with the internet. And that's what I want to win. So, you wouldn't believe this, but your government spends $60 billion a year on the 5% of the information they can steal, and they don't spend shit on open sources in 183 languages. We like to operate out of embassies, diplomatic cover. So when we steal code books, the entire CIA station comes in at 5 o'clock at night. The foreign guards call local liaison, say, hey, CIA's working tonight. Local liaison watches the airwaves and sees the mass communications between the embassy and the embassy, our embassy, U.S. embassy, and the embassy that we're stealing a code book from. Hello, This is not rocket science. The next morning, they walk into the ambassador and say, "Hi, CIA was in your office last night." And you can ask me later about how we walk through walls and all that good shit. We don't fucking process what we collect. And, oh, by the way, what we collect is less than 10% of what we need to know. No data standards, although I got to tell you, there is one small, tiny part of the U.S. intelligence community that I like, the Chief Information Officer. Major General Mayor Rose is not only into data standards and sharing, he shocked CIA security officers by having a forum open to foreigners. What a concept. We don't tag all of our stuff. In 1988, I told the intelligence, 1988, that's like the last century, okay? I told the intelligence community, if you don't have fucking geospatial attributes on every datum, you cannot do real-time all-source processing that says, tell me everything there is to know about this click going back 200 years. Hello? Sorry, I'm getting excited. It's all these black t-shirts. They really turn me on. All right, so no interoperability, no all-source sharing. Now I'm going to go through these real fast because we want to get to this thing. Emphasis on security instead of answers. Would you believe this? CIA security is so fucking stupid. It is based on guys with high school educations that have gotten promoted by checking safes at night, that they insist on hiring high school kids from Kansas that are virgins who have never talked to a foreigner. This is a very small group, okay? And once you're a CIA analyst, if you dare to call a foreigner in the country you're responsible for, you get investigated. Hello? We're focused on threats instead of opportunities. Now, in my earlier speech, I talked about the 10 threats that the United Nations has identified, and I'll end with that. The bottom line is that the U.S. government is focused on less than 20% of what matters. We focus on local now instead of global future. This is symptomatic of Wall Street owning the U.S. government. We don't impact on the budget. If you really want to know what the U.S. budget and policy is, actually, if you want to know what U.S. policy is, you look at the budget. I'll tell you what U.S. policy is on Homeland Security today. It is prone.
Hi.
What? Lights! Camera! Action! I'm short, fat, and bald. I don't think I'm a movie star.
All right. So I'm sure that if I look on Amazon.com, you probably have a review up of it already. But have you read the Pentagon's new map, and do you think they're implementing some of the ideas in that book in the government?
I have read the Pentagon's new map. That book should have remained an article.
Yeah, it is. He does go
that
on.
is a well-meaning young man who has never read anything by anybody else, had some good ideas of his own. He has been overly influenced by Wall Street. I would place that book in about the third rank.
Well, he does talk a lot about connecting the intelligence community back with the rest of the world.
Mostly what he talks about in that book is how fucked up the Pentagon process is, which is why I gave it an extra star. Okay? It's not a serious book. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
The 9/11 Truth Movement has several schools. One is the Keene-Hamilton Commission. That's the official conspiracy theory, and that's a conspiracy theory that the first school accepts. The second one is the official conspiracy theory, but with some questions. The next one, sir, is the one that says we knew it was going to happen, and there was a breakdown. And I think that's what you're alluding to, that we're stupid, we're incompetent. But, sir, the one that's the most extreme...
I'm not a sir, I'm a Robert.
Okay, Robert. Robert, the one that at first seems to be the most extreme, but upon investigation it's the one that's the least of all the conspiracy theories. It's the one that's the least outrageous. And that's that the one I told you before that you were referring to, if you were leading up to this, that we're incompetent, let it happen, lie hop, really is superseded upon those who really care about this tragedy, not only for the heartbreak within New York, but even in this moment what's happening with Israel and Lebanon is my hop made it happen on purpose. That there's no laptop computer in a cave in Afghanistan and 18 people who may hate us like crazy but simply do not have the ability with box cutters to bring down a building. And
where are you going with this?
I want to know which school of I want to know which school of thought you're in. Excuse me?
No, that's fine. Okay, stop right there. I'll answer your question. There are several converging themes in my judgment. Converging theme number one is that the U.S. intelligence community has consistently, over the last 50 years, and certainly over the last 18 years, when I first started this dogfight, and 18 years ago I discovered that 80 to 90% of what we needed to know about the real world was not secret, not in English, not online, and not known to anybody in Washington, including the menopausal grandmothers in the Foreign Broadcasting Information Service. Okay, and I use that insult deliberately. Unfortunately, they're managed by young white boys in button-down collars that don't know fuck all about the world. Okay, so theme number one is we've shut out 80% of the information that we needed to know in order to understand the extremist Wahhabism thing that was being pushed out. Theme number two is that the Central Intelligence Agency has been politicized for all too long, to the point that they have been forbidden to talk to opposition groups in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, and elsewhere. Okay? So CIA is basically a castrated service that is limited to talking to foreign liaison, which hands them what they want them to know. All right? There's a third theme here. And I've read most of the books. In fact, I have a list on Amazon on books indicting Dick Cheney for 9/11. Dick Cheney was in charge of an exercise on 9/11. He was in charge of the entire U.S. government. He was using the Secret Service as his communication and control channel. There is a strong body of literature that suggests that Dick Cheney decided that he wanted to let 9/11 happen. There is a strong body of literature that says that Dick Cheney very deliberately allowed George Bush to make an ass of himself by reading a book upside down and then moving him around the country so that Dick Cheney could stay in Washington and be in charge. It is my absolute judgment that Dick Cheney is impeachable, indictable, and criminally negligent. All right? Now, there are other sub-themes in the literature. The FBI is probably the most moronic, incompetent agency in the U.S. government. Okay? And by the way, I am not Agent Steele. Agent Steele is a guy with one leg, okay, and it's spelled S-T-E-A-L. And when I was woken up naked after flying in from Australia in Chicago, they quickly discovered I was not Agent Steele, okay? But they were beautiful, very young people. I'd love to meet the cheerleader again. The fact of the matter is that FBI and CIA have been dicking around with half-ass recruitments while shutting out people. It is a known, documented fact that there were two walk-ins to the FBI, one in Orlando, one in Newark, New Jersey, a year prior to 9/11. And these walk-ins revealed the entire 9/11 plot. They revealed the names of the people involved, but they were what we would call virgins. Okay? They weren't in the records. And the 9/11, the FBI people checked their records and said, oh, well, we've never heard of these people, so you must be a fucking asshole. Get out of here. That's the way the U.S. government works. So I guess I would sum this up by saying that right now the neoconservatives and the radical Islamic fundamentalists love each other because they are using the politics of fear to steal us blind.
But you didn't answer my question.
All right, what's your question? In one sentence.
Lie hop, let it happen, still presupposes that people who, half of who've been discovered, they're not 19 hijackers, half of them have been discovered, and any of them, even if they wanted to, they simply couldn't have.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying you either lie hop or my hop, and lie hop is very destructive.
Can someone explain this question to me?
Let it happen on purpose. You're telling me that made it happen on purpose. Made it happen on purpose.
All right, next question.
I just ask for some humility because
All right,
Lebanon
next question.
wouldn't be in...
Thank you.
Good evening.
Are you going to do a striptease?
No. Yeah.
I'll go first.
I don't think so, gentlemen. There you go.
God, she's gorgeous.
Right.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Good evening.
In any event, you were discussing the technological advancements going on within the CIA and what have you.
No, there are no technological advancements going on at CIA.
Okay. Let me start over then again. The former CIA directors did focus less on raw or human intelligence for a time, ground intel, and they focused more on technological advancements, satellites,
Starting
what
with
have
Stansfield
you.
Turner.
Now, one can certainly see with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Iran what's going on there because there isn't much raw or human intelligence.
Right.
My question for you is this. How would you address this issue that because during a certain point the CIA did focus on that and now we're missing people in the field for human intelligence raw like that, how would you address that issue?
I actually have a press release on this topic. If you go to my website, you will see a table of contents from my website. I realized I have 30,000 pages on my website, and it didn't occur to me until this year after I had a very bad experience with Wikipedia that nobody is fucking reading below level 1. So I've created a sortable table of contents, and in there you'll find a press release called Revitalizing the Clandestine Service.
Okay.
Here's what it boils down to. In the 1950s and 60s, we had a clandestine service that looked like the United Nations. You would walk into the CIA, and we used to separate the analysts who we didn't trust. I mean, when I was a case officer and I was taken up to see the analysts in the 1980s, my chief of station said, don't tell them a fucking thing. Okay? This is how CIA works. Today, the entire intelligence community has been completely destroyed by Negroponte and this 1,000-person bullshit promotion above the Peter Principle. There is a very simple answer to clandestine intelligence, which is white boys don't know shit. You have to have multilateral, multinational stations in which the Americans provide the money and the processing technology and the management